Welcome to the joint City Council and Youth Council workshop in the City of Cape Coral. Today is March 30th, 2022. This meeting now comes to order. Please stand by the invocation and pledge allegiance by Councilmember Nelson.
Thank you, Mayor. Please bow your heads. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this special opportunity where we are allowed to share leadership with this bright young group. We pray that you continue to inspire them to lead, and whatever you do, make sure you inspire them to come back to Cape Coral should they leave us for higher education. God of mercy, we also pray for the Ukraine, for all humanity distorted by war. We pray for their safety and peace, and for the safety and peace of all of our residents in our beautiful city. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam City Clerk, please call the City Council roll.
Mayor Gunter.
Here.
Council members Cosden.
Here.
Hayden.
Here.
Long.
Here.
Nelson.
Here.
Shepherd. Here. Tate. Here. Welch.
Here.
All present.
And Madam City Clerk, could you please call the roll of the Youth Council?
Before I call roll, I would like to announce that members McGonigal Hall, Michael, and Reamer have indicated that they are unable to attend the meeting this evening, and I'll mark them excused. Bernal. Here. Blackwell. Brooker. Lynn. McMillan. Here. Osinski. Here. Rodriguez. Young. Zadowich. Here. So that is 5 present, 3 excused, and 2 absent.
Okay, thank you. Item 5 is citizens' input time. Maximum of 60 minutes is set for input from citizens on matters concerning city government, 3 minutes per individual. Please remember to state your name. Anyone that wishes to participate, citizens' input will use the podium to the left.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. My name is Dean Jewell. I live at 128 Southwest 15th Place. And we've been working with what I consider to be a pretty major problem with one of the city planning people for the last couple of years, Mr. Peterson. I never met him. If he's in here, I wouldn't know who he is. But we have spoken on the phone several times. And what had happened is when this rezoning took place back a couple of years ago, our property, as far as we knew, was always residential. Now all of a sudden we're commercial. And the problem that it possesses for me is I wanted to refinance my house with the interest rates. And unfortunately, you can't get commercial financing when you're, non-compliant or whatever they call it, that you guys have a term for it. So I'm very weary to try to apply for refinancing at a lower rate, which would save me a lot of money. Because if they checked it now, they would never give me the loan again. And in addition to that, it's an economic hardship on us because of the insurance. Heaven forbid, we had a natural disaster, a tornado, hurricane. My house was damaged more than 50%. I wouldn't be able to rebuild that. I'd have to rebuild it as commercial. And guess what? And I don't have a place to live no more. You know, my wife and I retired down here. She has stage 4 cancer now. So she was the one who was kind of carrying it on. But I'm here to speak on our behalf. Dave Elvez, my next door neighbor, and I formed a neighborhood coalition. And we did get a hold of all our neighborhoods, all of our neighbors who have a home on this area. I sent Mr. Long a copy of all the people that are affected in this particular, well, I shouldn't say all the people, the first 2 blocks that are affected by us. Where I live, there is nothing commercial around me at this time. Dave's house is to my left. We have an empty lot and then a couple residential houses on down, another lot, an empty house. I mean, not an empty house, but a residential house. And we have talked to neighbors and they're all on board with this, getting the zoning changed. So after, I believe I talked to Mr. Peterson, it's almost been 2 years, it's been at least 18 months. And he says, well, you know, if you can wait, you know, eventually it's going to take care of itself. He said that they did a lot of these rezonings and a lot of people got caught like in the crossfire. They were never really meant to happen, but because they did it back in 2010 or whenever you guys did it, I don't remember what the dates are. He told me. I have everything written down at home. I wasn't planning on speaking or I'd have brought more notes. But anyhow, I think you get the gist of my problem.
Yeah,
And
if you
Dave's
would-
problem, you know. In addition to that, keep in mind that so long as it's non-compliant, it keeps the value of our homes down for us too.
Well, sir, your 3 minutes is up, but if you
I-
would,
I
have a
thank
seat,
you.
have a seat, and I'm sure we'll have a little further discussion after citizens' input. Thank you.
Oh, you want to go? Yeah, same topic, go ahead.
Same topic.
Yeah, we got everyone.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Councilors. It's my pleasure to have the opportunity. I'm Dave Alves, and as my neighbor noted, I live on 124 Southwest 15th Place, right next door. We've been there for about 11 years now. I enjoy the piece of property, but the concerns, in addition to what Mr. Jewell has noted, in discussing with a lot of our neighbors, they're primarily elderly and women, single-head of household. So it not only impacts us, but it impacts a number of people in the area. When I moved in, it was a residential piece of property. I did ask my broker if the property was all residential, and I was assured it was. That was 10 years ago, 11 years ago. And now we've discovered that it's been rezoned commercial. It's a concern to me because we don't have any commercial in the area. The closest commercial is the other side of south of 5th Street to Cape Coral to Pine Island. Our concern is between 5th and 1st Terrace, which is all residential housing. They're all individually owned. All the property is individually owned, so it doesn't lend itself well to commercial development. They're basically 9,000 and 10,000 square foot lots, which also doesn't lend itself to commercial property. And make it even more interesting, one side of the road, one side of the land is Chiquita, the other side is Southwest 15th Place. Southwest 15th Place looks to a residential area. And then there's a 10-foot easement that runs between the two properties on Southwest 15th Place and Chiquita. Once again, does not lend itself to commercial development. So I can understand that when the city was doing rezoning, they did a blanket approach to a number of lots, a number of pieces of property in the city. I'm sure, we were here at the last council meeting, it's not new or unusual for you to have to rezone property to make it fit the current use. I'm asking for consideration, for that consideration for our neighborhood as well. I thank you for the opportunity to present our case. I look forward to hearing from all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon, Tom Shadrack, permanent resident, District 1. Appreciate the time to talk today. And I'm going to talk about a topic that was talked about last week, but rest assured it's not about storm shutters. So, the yacht club was talked about last week about a new revenue financing source. There was never discussed that a lot of these revenue sources are already in our budget today. You know, that 1.3 million, those top items are already used for expenses today. And if we don't have those, if you move those to a revenue bond to pay for it, who's covering those expenses? That's $27 million over 20 years that have to come up with tax money to cover where those things are paying expenses today. The bottom one, the only one that's generating new revenue, is parking. Looks like a lot of money. This is a model I developed since I don't have access to the finance department's model that I think they gave to you guys. But my view is you got to come up with $7,000 a day. 1,200 cars a day have to be paying $6 to pay for the revenue. That seems a little unrealistic to me. Okay, next chart. Now, this is just nothing I'm going to talk about in detail. It's just a lot of data. I want to focus on the last column. I'm suggesting that we delay 4 of the parks that haven't started yet. They're not through bid. They're not finished planning. But if we delayed those parks, that would save $20 million from the GO bonds. So the next chart, just quickly, if you could save that, delaying those 4 parks, you're down to just using $38 million for the other parks. That means you've got $21 million to use for the yacht club. So you got to come up with $38 million more to do the whole $60 million for what you want to do at the yacht club. These are some reserves. Originally, the original plan was to use care service, FEMA money to pay for the excess. That's still a good plan. At the last meeting we had on the workshop, there was a surplus from last year. We've got the TDC money we've applied for. You'll have some surplus from this year because we use very conservative estimating in our budgeting. And there'll be an increase in money next year just because inflation is still going up. So there's a lot of money that we can use to pay for the parks and the yacht club without doing a revenue bond and then charging people to park there. I was at the yacht club today. There was over 1,000 people there today using that park. I don't think any of the other parks that I'm saying delay have near that amount of usage. This is an important park to get done now and not charge people for it. These charts are available for you to look at detail. Thanks for your consideration.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else wishing to speak on citizens' input, please come forward. Seeing none, citizens' input is now closed. Is there any council discussion on citizens' input? The only thing I want to mention, Mr. City Manager, is if we could have staff maybe get with the 2 speakers regarding the zoning concerns that they had.
We will do that, Mr. Mayor, and just a general comment. I would say that on average, you're probably addressing these zoning recalibration efforts, and you're probably approving on average maybe 22 to 25 rezonings a month. And so we still have a lot of these properties throughout the city that staff has been diligently working through over the last 2 to 3 years or so. So I don't know where this particular property falls in that sequence, but we will definitely reach out to them and see where it is, and if that's something that we are bringing back to council at a later date, that'll appear on your agenda. So, but it is consistent with what we've been doing citywide.
And just curious, if you have a resident that has a desire to refinance, do they get any type of priority versus someone that just wants to do a simple rezoning, but they're not interested at that time for doing any type of refinancing?
So if I may defer to Mr. Cotero, gentleman to my left, to address that question.
That information is very valuable to us. In this particular situation, I was not aware until the gentleman just said it. This particular property, my impression was this particular property was in our level 3 when we did the triage. We're done with 1. I think your final hearing on the stuff in 1 is next week. Mm-hmm. But the answer is yes, to the extent we can do it, because if it was one house on a block where there was vacant property, it'd be easy, but if there were other people in there, that would make a difference, we would do it. It would really be a case-by-case basis, but it really depends upon the number of lots and the amount of the land in that particular application, but that was a factor. As Mr. Hernandez said, we will certainly meet with the property owner and move that up accordingly to the next round.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Long.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I was just going to follow along that same regard, because I know I spoke with Ms. Cotero about this briefly, and it was identified previously as not being on the list to rezone through the calibration efforts, but now he's saying that he didn't have that information. I don't believe I had it at the time either, with regards to the gentleman wanting to rezone. So I guess my question was basically going to piggyback off of yours before you had asked it, was how that changes, if at all, the prioritization of that, and whether we could potentially work towards getting these guys the relief that they need in that regard. Thank you.
Councilmember Shepherd.
Yeah, I was interested in if we can expedite looking at their property, but I see you already are implementing that. And I'd also like to thank Mr. Shadrack for his research and information that he brought to us today. Thank you.
Councilmember Tate.
Thank you. We have this problem in a lot of places, and I understand your not ability to finance, because we've had this situation everywhere. Vince, can you give us, or send to council a timeline, please, of when you think this area might be coming before us, and see if it's going to be, are we looking at 3 months, are we looking at 6 months, are we looking at a year? Because interest rates are going to change, and it's going to be important for them. We just took care of some condominiums and a whole bunch of other properties last week, so if you could address some sort of a timeline to council, that would be great.
I'll submit a timeline to the council. This particular one in the next batch would probably be soon, right after you come back.
That would be great. That would help them tremendously.
We could be going to the planning commission and
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
Or, excuse me, the hearing examiner.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And Mr. Shadrack, I appreciate the charts. The problem I see is that the voters voted for a $60 million bond and expect parks. And they did not expect to fund the yacht club, from what I understand. I wasn't here when they did it, but I was a voter and I voted for it. And my vote said that they were going to build all these parks. And so as a constituent who agreed to spend the money, I can't see how we would go back and tell people, I'm sorry, we're not going to build your parks, but we're going to put that money into the yacht club. Because not everybody uses it, unfortunately, or fortunately, because it can't hold many more people. But I do appreciate the information, and probably can go with you on the other chart that you had. The first chart, can look at that and see all the expenses, because there are some in there that you don't have. So, but thank you.
Yeah, also, Mr. Shadrack, I appreciate the information, but I kind of agree with Councilmember Tate. Back when we were having these discussions and having the community involvement throughout the city to describe exactly what we were going to do in these parks, that's what we put on the referendum. Me personally, I would have a hard time backing any of those parks out, because we asked our constituents to go vote for a Parks Go Bond referendum, and now we possibly would pull the rug out from underneath of them afterwards. I feel uncomfortable for me personally in doing that, because if I promised you something, that's what I want to make sure that we do. We fulfill our promise to the community. We asked them to go vote for it, and in return, we'll try to give them exactly what we told them that we were going to give them. Now, I do believe with you that we're going to have to be creative with the financing of the yacht club. And if you recall, in the last meeting that we had as a council, I asked for an overview exactly how that revenue bond will work, and be more specific on what revenue that we're going to utilize, or at least identify for that. Because the $3.9 million that is going to take on an annual basis for that $60 million in debt, personally, I don't see that revenue there, but I know that the city manager is going to be bringing additional information to us in the future. So maybe we'll both have that answer at some time. Councilmember Tate?
I just want to say, just for the record, that $6 figure that you just gave out for parking, I don't want anyone to pick that up and think that that's what we're doing, because we've not discussed that. The last we discussed was $2, and I'd prefer that we don't just, until we actually know what we're going to know, I don't want to talk about it. Okay, well.
All right. Any other comments from council? Okay, seeing none. We'll move on to the next item. Mr. City Manager, here I see here that you'd like to give a brief discussion before we move into the next item, so I'll turn the floor over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of City Council, members of the Youth Council. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen in attendance today. So I was asked, Mr. Mayor, just to basically for the benefit of the members of the Youth Council to just briefly provide them with a state of the Cape. And I'm proud to say that we are beginning the second half of our fiscal year, and the Cape is in outstanding shape, better than I certainly am. We have numerous strengths and opportunities that are leading the city's continued progress into the future, notably our financial strength. So going into this fiscal year, members of the Youth Council, our overall taxable value increased almost 11%, and the city's total valuation is $18.4 billion. That allowed us to lower our millage rate, and what that is, that's our property tax rate, and that's what we charge our customers for the services that they receive. And so that is continuing a trend that we've had here in the city for several years to continue reducing what we charge our customers for services. In addition, our bond ratings, which is basically our credit rating. When we have to go out and borrow money, it's just like a credit rating. The stronger your bond rating, the less money you pay in interest, and therefore your borrowing costs are lower. So we have very strong bond ratings. Our total budget is quickly approaching the $1 billion mark. And when I say by total budget, I mean everything: water and sewer funds, building department funds, monies that we get from taxes, things of that nature. So we are a $1 billion a year business. And I'm proud to say, members of the Youth Council, that last year, in working very closely with our friends over in the charter school system and also with City Council, we've resolved a long-term financial issue that we had projected, and we dedicated a revenue source that we've identified to provide an ongoing revenue stream to be able to repay the loans that the city took out to build our quality charter schools that are here in the city of Cape Coral. So we're very strong financially. The city has continued to grow economically. The census reports that in the last 10 years, the city's population has grown over 26%. People still want to come here. And hopefully, when you're done with your education, as Councilmember Nelson mentioned, you will come back to the Cape and you will open up your businesses here in the Cape and join the other folks from across the country who recognize the city is one of the top locations in the entire country as a place to move to and open up a business. And I've got numerous here. CoreLogic, we're among the top 12. A recent LinkedIn ranking says that we are in the, we took the #1 spot of all the major metropolitan areas in the country as the best place to live for remote work. U.S. Real Estate News ranked our metropolitan area the 3rd in the country in terms of the fastest growing places in the United States. And so as you see, people want to be here. People are attracted to Cape Coral for a variety of reasons, and they are joining all of us as new neighbors. Recently, this city council revised its economic development strategy and provided over $2.5 million to attract new businesses. So our residents can work in Cape Coral and don't have to commute across the river and spend 45 minutes to an hour in traffic to go to work. So we continue to work through that. We're very excited that we welcomed new businesses along the Pine Island Road corridor, Farmer Joe's, a new emergency room that is getting ready to open up that's being built by Fawcett Healthcare Systems. And of course, we have the new Cove at 47th that plans to break ground hopefully later this summer. And those are just some examples of the economic growth that we are experiencing here in this city. In terms of public safety, members of the Youth Council, we continue to rank among the top cities in the state and the country as one of the safest cities to live in. We've added more positions to our police department this past year. more firefighters, and more fire support positions. We are currently constructing new state-of-the-art training centers for our public safety professionals in the police and fire departments. We're completing Fire Station 12, and we've begun the design of Fire Station 13. From a Parks and Recreation standpoint, the city is investing heavily in making sure that our park system is able to sustain all of the growth that we've been having. And just a few minutes ago, you heard about our $60 million bond issue, where we have committed to our residents to build and expand and improve new parks and existing parks throughout the city. So we're behind schedule, as Mr. Shadrack mentioned, but those are really, those delays are attributed to the pandemic and reasons beyond our control. But we will deliver on that $60 million bond issue, and we will provide our residents with the parks that they asked for. In addition, we want to make the city more aesthetically pleasing, and this city council contributed an additional $2 million to help plant trees and to beautify medians throughout the city. We have recently hired a city arborist who's going to be joining us to help us take care of our tree canopy and the investments that we have made in landscaping throughout the 130 square miles that constitutes Cape Coral. We're working on a variety of projects to improve water quality throughout the city, and in the near future, hopefully we'll be making some major announcements with that. And of course, we're working very closely with the state and our sister city across the river, Fort Myers, to build a new water reuse pipeline to provide more water for our residents so they can use reuse water to irrigate their lawns, thus stabilizing the water in our canals and keeping that reuse water from being dumped into the Caloosahatchee River. That is an innovative project that our staff has been working on. In addition, we've invested heavily in our infrastructure. We're moving forward with our next 30-year plan to ensure that our residents citywide have access to potable water and sanitary sewer system. The City Council has adopted the Utilities Master Plan. We've invested more than $2.5 million into more sidewalks to ensure that all of our schools have sidewalks within 1 mile of the school. We're investing in creating a bridge rehabilitation fund to make sure that all of our bridges are structurally sound and meet the needs of our community. We continue to resurface our roads and so forth. Our challenges that you will have to address at some point as members of the Youth Council. We continue to experience inflationary pressures. The cost of everything is going up, from hiring employees to finishing out the yacht club and our parks program. Things cost more money, and we only have so much money at our disposal. So we've got to figure out how to do more with less. The cost of housing is becoming more and more unattainable for many people that work in this community. As I said before, our population continues to grow, and that is, along with that growth, we're seeing prices going up because of its supply and demand, right? And so that's something that we're going to have to deal with over the long term. Keeping our community mobile, meaning people are able to go from point A to point B, is going to be something that the Youth Council will need to take into account at some point, and this City Council is also doing that. Keeping pace with growth, making sure that we have enough staff and enough facilities to welcome all the new residents that come to this city, and that we're able to provide them the services that they desire from local government. And of course, when you have all of this growth, you have environmental pressures, and that's something that needs to be on our radar screen moving forward. We have a variety of plans that help us address those things, everything from a strategic plan to a visioning session that we're doing, and a variety of other ones that you will probably hear about at some point today. So I want to conclude with this. The city is in good shape, and always remember this, that we are a city on the move, and that we are a city that is flowing with possibilities. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager. Okay, we'll move on to our first item in discussion, which is item 1, youth needs, mental health, and future education. And I'll now turn the floor over to Councilmember Hayden.
Yeah, before we get into the topic, I just wanted to take a minute to talk about how this day came about. When I took over as liaison last year, it was important for me to expose to our youth members other levels of government. So during that time, usually once a month, we had the property appraiser come in from Lee County. We've had our financial services director talk to them about the budget. We had Angela Melvin come in from Valerie's house to talk about the mental health struggles that they face for families that lose a loved one. And as we started to shape what today was going to look like, I asked them, and all these questions that they will ask tonight are theirs. And you're going to see they're good questions, and they're going to make you think. But I asked them to tailor their questions towards, and it's been mentioned a couple times by Councilmember Nelson and by the city manager, what will this city 20 years from now look like if or when they return here and have families of their own? What are they going to have to be dealing with? Are they going to be sitting up here at some point? And one of their biggest concerns was mental health. And that was a big discussion last year as they proceeded with a project for the Florida League of Cities, which leads me into, as we get into youth needs, leads me into our first speaker, who is Dr. Simeone, who is Vice President, Medical Director of Behavioral and Mental Health for Lee Health, and he will be addressing that topic. Dr. Simeone?
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Paul Simeone, and as Council Hayden noted, I am the VP Medical Director for Behavioral Health at Lee. So in that role, I have I sort of perform three functions. The first is to build out strategy for pediatric and adult behavioral health. We spend a lot of time planning based on the fact that we have our ear to the ground, especially during the pandemic, trying to figure out how best to meet the needs of the community. Second role is really to inspire those strategic plans by building out services and programs that deal with the various mental health challenges, substance abuse challenges that we face in Southwest Florida. And then thirdly, my role is to spend a lot of time building liaisons and collaborations with our community partners throughout the area. From where I sit, I think what I'd like to say is this, that there have been three vectors that have really conditioned the situation we're in. Before COVID, we had a pretty significant mental health crisis in the United States, especially with children and adolescents. When COVID hit, over the last 2 years, we have, by every measure of well-being, it doesn't matter whether you're talking about mental health, spiritual health, physical health, well-being has been compromised in really significant ways. I was just talking with the superintendent about the fact that what she's noticing is that now we're beginning to see the tail, now that we're out of COVID, we're beginning to see the tail of many of these problems that people have been struggling with over the last 2 years. And I noted to her that it's one of the hallmarks of trauma that the response is always delayed. So that from my point of view, what we're going to be seeing over the next 1 to 2 years is some of the fallout, especially from COVID, and with kids in particular, the fact that they were isolated, that they were deprived of their peer connections during really significant developmental periods. A lot of kids who are otherwise doing well in school have had quite significant difficulties with that. All of these are going to coalesce to produce greater needs, and at Lee Health and in the community, we're aware of this, and we're doing our best to figure out how best to manage those needs. The last thing I would say is that we've lived in a period over the last handful of years where there has been significant social, political, and economic distress. I think about it as upping the ambient level of cultural distress. And we're seeing that as well. So these three vectors have really coalesced to produce some, really serious trouble, both with kids and adolescents. One statistic that I generally trot out just to make the point, and this is hard to talk about, but suicide is now the second leading cause of death with children ages 10 to young adults 34. So if you can just let that sink in for a minute, that's an astonishing statistic. And the other thing to keep in mind is that the average wait time for a child in the United States, and I think Florida is actually in a slightly worse case here, is 8 to 10 years from the first onset of discernible symptoms. So if you have a 10-year-old child who's struggling with depression or anxiety or any kind of traumatic difficulties, on average, it's 8 to 10 years before that person ends up in the healthcare system. So what I always say about that is that nobody waits 8 to 10 years for diabetes treatment. Nobody waits 8 to 10 years for cancer treatment. But behavioral health has always been the stepchild in the healthcare system. I came here 3.5 years ago from Boston, where I finished my training and spent the entirety of my career. And so I've seen over the 40 years that I've been in practice and in leadership positions, I've seen this change somewhat. We've moved to parity, which means that we try to place behavioral health and substance use disorders on par with other physical conditions. That has been more an ideological win than a practical one because the reimbursement rates don't really follow that. And so at Lee Health, what we've noticed is that when we develop plans to produce services that the community absolutely needs, we have a really hard time paying for them. Medicaid rates have not increased in 20 years. And so when you stand up these programs, we often have to go to foundation money to backfill some of the salaries and benefits. So, and the last point I'll make is that, Southwest Florida is a workforce shortage area, so designated by the federal government. We have more troubles down here than I've seen, certainly in Boston, recruiting people down here. Partly we talked about it today as the increased cost of living. It's hard to get mid-level people down here, social workers, master's level people, and so that has prompted us at Lee Health to try and stand up some more training programs. When I was in Boston, I was on the faculty. I was in the Department of Psychiatry at Harvard Medical School, and so I had a lot to do with training residents and social workers and interns. Training is near and dear to my heart, and the more that we can build a farm team, frankly, the more we can deal with the workforce shortage issue. And so we're dealing with that with FGCU and FSW and the Florida FSU College of Medicine, on which I'm on that faculty. So I'm happy to talk about all manner of behavioral health issues, substance abuse issues, and thank you again for inviting me to talk today.
Thank you, Doctor. I'll now turn the floor over to Vice Chair Bernal for her question.
There we go. Okay. Hello, Mr. Mayor, council members. I appreciate the opportunity to be able to speak with you today. My first concern regarding youth needs would be the question, has there been anything new offered to kids struggling with mental health recently within the Cape Coral City community?
Doctor, I'll have you respond to that first, if you might, if there's any new programs that Lee Health might be working on that address mental health issues among teenagers, younger kids.
Yeah, we are in the process of, we have a strategic plan to build out 4 new expansion clinics on the pediatric and adolescent end of things, one of which is going to be located in Cape Coral. That's on the planning board. We've got it funded. The rate limiting step, as I noted earlier, is recruitment. We are in the process of recruiting 17 new psychologist positions over the next 1 to 2 years. And so that's something, we're aware of this problem. We're aware that the wait list is extremely high, especially in places like Cape Coral. just to give you an impression of what we're dealing with, when I first got here, we had 2 mental health people in the Lee Health Pediatrics outpatient clinic. We now have 40. We've increased the visit rate by 1,300%, and we still have a 6-month waiting list. Okay, so that's what we're up against. The other thing I want to say is I'm working very diligently with the community to develop a strategic 5-year plan. Some of you might know about this. We are in the process of finishing up our ad hoc council work and applying for a $5 million grant through ARPA to begin to develop what I think this region needs more than anything, which is a regional mental health and SUD, substance use disorder, consortium. So that we don't any longer try to deliver these services in a fragmented, siloed way. We need a continuum of care that gets everybody who touches all of the same patients connected through a hub model where there's no wrong door entry, and we take care of people from the front door. We case manage them. We have a data analytics program that helps people talk to one another. We have a governance structure where we ensure equity, diversity, and a sense of real inclusiveness. So we're working on multiple levels, but frankly, there's a lot of work to do, and we're doing it.
Yeah, I think over the years as I dealt with this topic in my previous job, Florida ranks among the bottom of all states in mental health funding per capita. And we've asked the legislature for years to address this more seriously, and it doesn't seem to be rising up as fast as it should be. Yes.
So thank you for mentioning that. This is something that I've spoken to our local county commissioners and in Tallahassee. The range of money spent per capita in the state, I think is, I want to tell you what it is because it's a stark comparison. The number 1 state, which came as a big surprise to me as a Massachusetts person, is Maine. Maine spends about $435 per capita on mental health and substance use services. Massachusetts, which is my home state where I grew up and where I practiced, is around $180, and they're pretty much at the average. Florida is $36. So you don't get much for $36. And so when I met with Mrs. DeSantis when she came around, she says, "Oh, I hear you're from Boston, and tell me a little bit about what you think about what's going on down here." And I said, "Well, this is the situation we're in, and unless we can increase reimbursement rates, which it ties to everything. If we can't get reimbursement rates up, we cannot build the services that we're called upon to build."
And I think as a council, as we look at our asks each year before the legislative session starts, might be something for us to consider as we hope that they increase our awareness of what's happening in our funding levels as well. As we move through this, if council members would like to address it, if it's all right with the mayor, just push your button and we'll do it that way. And for this first question, would anyone like to weigh in? No? Okay. Dr. Simeone, thank you for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
We'll move on to Vice Chair Bernal, if you would like to ask your second question.
Thank you. My second question is, how does Cape Coral plan to meet the demands of a growing student population? I know you presented that we have a rise in the population and we're increasing our availability to people to come and we can grow, and that's an amazing thing to celebrate, but it's also something that demands attention as a council.
We're supposed to have 2 school board members here to address this, but we do have our superintendent, Collins, here. So if you would like to address that from the Oasis Charter School perspective, that would be great.
Good afternoon, everyone. Jackie Collins, Superintendent of the Oasis Charter School System. We have 2 elementary schools, a middle and a high school. But I can give you my opinion on what I think the city needs to look at in the future for the growing population of students, because we will have undoubtedly more students coming in. The population of school-age students, 5 through 18, is growing exponentially, and that means we'll probably eventually need more schools here in the city. And as far as that's concerned, we also need school pathways. So not only do we need more elementaries, maybe more middle and high schools, but we're going to need some kind of community college or university satellite campus here in this area. And in Cape Coral would be ideal, because high schools work very closely and have partnerships with colleges and universities. They do it for a variety of different levels, and we need to make sure that we form a K through post-secondary pathway. So that's something that I think eventually I would like to see somewhere here in this area, so that our high school in particular and Lee County's high schools can connect with those campuses for dual enrollment and things along that nature. But what I'm thinking is that, we need to start thinking about how we educate students for jobs in the future. And technology is the largest, fastest growing field today. Are we educating our students to be ready for these jobs in the future? And very few school systems are. It's expensive. It costs a lot of money for materials, a lot of personnel that's specialized and qualified to teach in certain areas. So those are the types of school systems we need to develop, those that are really going to look forward to the jobs that exist out there. And that's technology, it's cybersecurity, it's robotics, it's simulation. And I think that's kind of what we should look for, so that we can produce students that are technologically ready for the job workforce when they graduate from high school, or they can go on to post-secondary education and continue. So I think that's kind of the direction that we need to focus on, because we need students to come back to Cape Coral, to live, to build their businesses, even if it's a virtual business. That's what we're looking for, to make sure that you go and learn if you have to, or stay and learn, but come back and live in the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie.
Councilmember Tate?
I'm curious, what would you like to see, or what are the needs that you think that we have? You've been doing this for a while now in this role, and it's easy for you to ask us, but you're the user, you're the students. So what is it that you see is a shortage or a need in the city that we're not addressing? I'm not saying that we're not, but I'm just asking you as a group, what is the 1, 2, or 3 things? Go ahead, whoever wants to answer.
I believe to at least some degree, my school doesn't have, there it goes, a technology program, like, advanced enough. Like, I do Technology Student Association, and this year alone, we didn't have a teacher to go with us to competition. We actually went with a substitute teacher. Our teacher quit midway through the school year. And we don't have the robotics kids needed to run a robotics class, or the proper computers needed to run a game simulation class. And it's an issue because we don't have funding and we don't have enough qualified teachers, and I would really like to see that improve, since it's something I'm very passionate about.
Okay. Anybody else that, yes? Just go down the line if you want. I'm curious to see what you feel is lacking.
Well, are we going down the line?
Sure, Claire.
Just as what was mentioned before, I believe that having some form of major university, not just in, you have to go to Fort Myers for that, something in Cape Coral to draw that more educated population into our area from when they start younger, because although people are moving, as families, it would be nice to have people move when they're still young and learning and growing in the area. So I think that getting a university, other than just our technical college, started in the area could be really beneficial, especially for students that aren't looking to move elsewhere and want to keep helping the community that they were raised in.
Thank you.
Following up with the technical college situation, so a lot of people kind of steer away from doing dual enrollment, and it's super beneficial for high school students today, but a lot of people see the distance as an issue and they don't want to do dual enrollment just because of how far it is from Cape Coral. So a lot of people don't get the benefits of the extra credits for graduation and colleges simply because of the distance.
And another thing is, I go to Ida Baker, and I know at Oasis they offer the home ec class, and we don't have that. And I know a lot of other high schools within Cape Coral don't have the home ec class, and I think that should be something that should also be offered.
For my school, I think it's more of the shortage of teachers that we have and also lunch staff because of COVID. But I think, so even after COVID, some staff never came back. And then for our lunches, the manager, she was quarantined and she couldn't make it for like 3/4 of the school year. So the lunch was not very great. And yeah, it's mostly the shortage of staffs because during COVID we had hybrid teaching and a lot of teachers they were just frustrated with the online and in-person students like at the same time. And if we had more teachers, I think that issue would have been solved. A primary concern for me, I'm not sure how much what we're speaking about would be the city's responsibility. I understand that some of this would fall under the school board, but my primary concern would be some of what we've suggested. I really greatly appreciate the information that was provided to us about the Lee Health expansion into devoting time and resources into mental health and investing in the youth of our city, and that is amazing to hear. But I think my primary concern is still mental health and substance exposure when it comes to the youth. I know for a fact that the students within my school have a difficulty when it comes to these topics, and I think that investing, at least the city investing in maybe youth centers or places where students can congregate and learn and grow, that would be safe places for them to develop without exposure to some of these harmful substances, and perhaps places where they could escape maybe a dangerous situation at home or maybe a not healthy situation at home. I think that would be very, very beneficial.
Have you ever been to our youth center?
No, would that be the Bill?
The Bill Austin.
Bill Austin Youth Center? Yes, I have.
Okay.
Thank you. But I would just say that because of the growing
Right.
population, it would be very beneficial to maybe provide more or invest in that further.
Thank you.
I strongly, full-heartedly believe that somehow making any institution for secondary education would be strongly beneficial for not just the kids of Cape Coral, but for everyone as a whole. Both of my parents work in secondary education. My mom is the director of event services, and my dad's the director of IT at FSW. I've pretty much grown up watching them do their jobs, and I've seen a lot of things go bad, and I've seen a lot of things go good. And I can fully, wholeheartedly say that a secondary education center in Cape Coral would not only help out the kids, but it would boost city morale. It would bring in so much revenue for the city, and it would encourage children to stay here and families to move here and to start a life here. My parents got together very young. They were married very young, and they moved lots of different places, and part of what drew them there was job opportunities. And opening a secondary education center not only draws younger families looking to go to those institutions, but it draws people from elsewhere. It gives them an opportunity to say, hey, Cape Coral has all this other good stuff. Cape Coral isn't just a place where older people go to retire, because that's typically what the youth knows. Like, everyone sitting up here right now can vouch for the fact that most people our age think of Cape Coral as somewhere that people go to retire. We don't have those landmarks that make people think that, oh, this is somewhere I could stay. I don't have to go to Estero to FGCU, or I don't have to go to FSW in Fort Myers. I can stay right here in my place that I love. My parents still live here. It makes things cheaper for everyone, and I think it could be very beneficial. Thank you.
Thank you to all of you. I think that's very insightful. I think we'll all write down secondary college when we leave.
Councilmember Nelson.
Thank you, Mayor. And I apologize because I didn't realize you were going to only ask one question about mental health and behavioral mental health for youth, and that's something that this council knows is very near and dear to my heart. I have a 16-year-old daughter who suffers from that, from anxiety and depression, and mercifully she's graduating in 3 months, knock on wood. So we've come out the other side for now. But Dr. Simeone was probably the first person I met the first time my daughter was Baker acted. And unfortunately, he's absolutely correct. It takes about 8 years for it to surface its ugly head, and it started around 4, when she was 4, that I realized there was something different off, you know, and she couldn't articulate. So behavioral mental health issues for pediatrics and adolescents has been a huge passion of mine. One of the things that I will say, to comment on what Dr. Simeone said about recruitment and getting people here, the biggest issue we have in Southwest Florida is competition of, competition. So you have an organization called Salus Care, where most teens and children who get Baker acted, they go to that center. Well, during the pandemic, when Salus Care was overflowing, they sent children to Golisanos. The biggest problem is that they're all competing for resources, and there's only so much funding available. And as Councilmember Hayden stated, Florida is notoriously 48, 49, or 50 in terms of funding federally. We had a town hall last year with Congressman Donalds. I brought up this very issue, and you know, unfortunately, the pandemic definitely caused a lot of behavioral mental health issues in adolescents, because last year when my daughter was Baker acted, the final time, praise God, she had to be sent to Golisanos, and there was no room. So he's absolutely correct. Now, I will say that we have a great city manager who has wonderful vision. And one of the things that we talked about relating to workforce and recruiting the type of jobs we need here in Cape Coral is we talked about it during our strategic planning. And he understood and agreed that there's got to be a way that the city, even though we don't provide services for mental health issues, that's not our business. But what we can do is we can figure out a way to assist people like Dr. Simeone and his continuum of care that he talked about. We can find a way as a city to be a member of that, to be a voice on that continuum of care, and also to figure out a way that we can help recruit those types of positions down here to Southwest Florida, because there are so many different organizations that compete for psychiatrists, psychologists, pediatric psychiatrists. Trust me, we've seen them all. And you know, I have a success story for now, and I'm grateful for that, but I think about all the other parents who don't. Workforce development is definitely an issue. We talk about that all the time on the campaign trail. People criticize us often by saying, you know, well, you're only 90%, you know, you're 90% residential and 10% or 8%, you know, commercial tax base. And so that is an issue. But as I've learned in my time here in Southwest Florida, which has been 14 years, is that you can recruit all the businesses you want. We can bring the high-tech businesses, we can bring, you know, more medical facilities, we can bring some more pediatric psychiatry facilities here, but where are you going to get the people to fill those jobs, right? So it starts with you all, okay? So talking about having a college here in Cape Coral, that's something I remember back in 2017 and 16, hearing the council at that time talk about, you know, bringing something to an area that we called Academic Village, and trying to get FGCU or FSW or even, you know, USF, UF, somebody to have a satellite campus here in Cape Coral. So I think that's something that we talked about too during our strategic planning, is to figure out a way how we can attract and support the next generation in this workforce development piece. So we're all hearing you, I think. I know we are. We're all hearing you. And trust me, this is a regional issue. You know, all of Southwest Florida is trying to figure out ways that they can focus on workforce development. And I don't have the current stat, and I apologize, but I also like to say this from up here, and that is 2 or 3 years ago, I think 38% of the people in Southwest Florida had an education above high school, meaning a 4-year degree, anything beyond that, or even a certification, so a welding certification, a trade. And trade schools, you know, those are a thing now. I mean, you know, in my generation, you didn't have a choice. You went to a 4-year college, you know, but I had a little brother who was very rebellious with the Mohawk in 1986, who said, no way, I'm not going to a 4-year college. And now he's an electrical engineer, but he went, you know, the technical route. So I think, you know, strengthening that in our city, we hear you loud and clear. And my hope is, you know, that we are able to deal with this teacher shortage that everybody's experiencing after COVID, and especially in our state, because, you know, unfortunately our teachers, I don't think, are paid enough. I know that our our long-term teachers definitely aren't paid enough. I know the governor's done a great job in trying to help the first-year teachers and the new teachers, but we've got to do something to handle that attrition and handle the 25 veteran teachers, right? So we're listening. So I appreciate that, and I appreciate the topics that you all picked. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Shepherd.
Yeah, I have two things I'd like to bring up. A long time ago, when I was a young child, a young teenager, or even younger, we had a YMCA in our community. And I noticed that a lot of the kids I grew up with saw that as a place not just for fun activities, but to be with other kids their age and to vent, you know, what they might be dealing with at home, you know, if there's a problem at home. And I can remember that there were people there that they could talk to for support and for guidance. I'm using that organization as an example because I dealt with that as a child. I don't know if that's the right organization that we would want here today, but do you all think that there would be a good idea to have some kind of nonprofit in our city that's like a YMCA for kids to go for fun activities as well as maybe people there to talk to? Because that could be something that our city strives to get to come here. And one more thing, real quick, the technology part. I have 6 children of all ages, and what I've learned is a lot of times the schools are like a little behind because everything's advancing so rapidly. So this question is for our superintendent and our city manager. Do you think it is possible for us to go to these large tech companies, because technology is changing so rapidly, and get them to pay for an actual class and sponsor it, where they pay for the teacher, the educator, they pay for the class, and we give them a tax benefit or a write-off, because now our students would get the latest and greatest technology because now it's somebody from these high-tech companies that's actually teaching them. I think that would be a tremendous magnet for our city if we can create something like that, where we go to these high-tech companies, we offer them some type of write-off. Instead of saying to them to build a business here, why don't you literally finance a class and teach us, you know, teach our children the technologies that you're pushing forward. So now they're learning from the latest, greatest. So that was my other topic and my other suggestion. I don't know if that's something that can legally be done or allowed to be done, but it's just thinking outside the box. And they're my 2 statements, and if you guys would like to say things, sure.
Go ahead. Ms. Young.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do agree that a facility such as a YMCA could be beneficial. I think that we face a lot of problems right now when we look at the William B. Austin Youth Center of people not using it, not enough people using it. And I don't think that it's a lack of knowledge among the kids or the parents. I think that it's a lack of interest on both parts. I know that when I've talked to multiple members and people who work at the youth center, we've discussed this topic before, and what they've told me is that they've tried to throw out new programs and they've tried to create new incentives for kids to come use these facilities, but just nothing is working. And I think that really brings me back to the point where you were talking about a place where people can vent, mental health, things like that. We have resources, but it's unfortunately, it gets to the point where people who suffer with mental health, they are not seen until it is too late for them. I think that Ms. Nelson could agree with me on this, that a lot of the time it's not really recognized in a lot of kids, and kids don't even know they're going through it themselves until it happens to be too late, or it gets to a point where serious action needs to be taken. And I think it's more of a matter of kids feeling like they have the access to these tools, these places. They know they're there, but there's something inside them, a willingness that's letting them not reach out to those things because they know it's available. It's just something different. It's not advertised well, but children just don't feel like they are able to get the help they need, especially when talking about abusive situations in homes and not even in a traditional way. It's very common for kids nowadays, especially kids our age. We face a lot of pressure and many different aspects relating to school and academics and outside activities, and children just are kind of conditioned at this point to feel like they can't reach out, and if they do reach out, it makes them look weak or not strong. And like I said, I do think that another place within the city, like a YMCA or another youth center, could be very beneficial, but I think it comes more down to kids need to know that this is somewhere they could walk to if they needed to. This is somewhere they can go take shelter if they want. They know that there's people they can talk to there. But I think that it's just going to take a lot more than simply putting up another building and advertising to get kids to feel like they can actually use these resources. Thank you.
Ms. McMillan?
Thank you, Mayor. So I personally am a little bit biased because I am quite involved with the YMCA. This past state session, they allowed a group of us in a program called Youth in Government to go up to Tallahassee and lobby on behalf of the YMCA. And I was fortunate enough to be one of that group, and one thing that I noticed, every single person that we talked to in that building had some connection to the YMCA. And I think that a building or an organization like a YMCA, they learned to swim there when they were hardly 2. It's a building and a company that's well known and one that people have connections with when they're younger, so they feel safer to go there if, let's say, they're a teenager and they have mental health needs when they're older. The Y will always have a program available for them. And when you start them young in that area, they learn to trust that type of building. So I think that a YMCA in our city, I don't know why I did not think of that before, but I think that that is an amazing idea, and I would be a really big advocate for specifically a YMCA in our city.
Thank you. Superintendent Collins, did you like to weigh in?
I was going to speak to Councilman Shepherd's idea about technology and having companies either come in and teach the course or provide or pay for the class. And that's a very good idea. We already have 2 that are doing that. One is a CompTIA, Introduction to Cybersecurity. They designed a curriculum in middle school, and our students are taking it. So we're using that as a pilot. And we also have a biomedical company that designed a robot, a hand robot, and they've donated all their materials and their coursework so that we can pilot that program as well. So those opportunities are out there. And I think if schools knew that, they could take advantage of that and save significantly on funds.
Thank you. Mr. City Manager?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to just address the issue with pertaining to the YMCA. I'm pleased to let members of the Youth Council know that this City Council has previously authorized us to work with the YMCA and identify lands that are currently owned by the city that we could lease or sell or donate to the YMCA. And we've been having discussions with them probably for about a year now. And so we are actively pursuing that type of a partnership with the YMCA.
Thank you. Councilmember Long?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, real quickly, Ms. Collins, I actually had the wonderful opportunity to meet with you earlier in the week and tour Oasis North, and during our discussion, something had come up, and you may have just covered it, but I just wanted to make it clear. You had mentioned that you guys had a partnership with Full Sail University. Were they one of the 2 involved in those 2 programs there?
No, not in those 2 programs. They're offering scholarships for our students who are graduating that are going through our technology pathway. They're offering big scholarships for them.
Okay, because that's also another funnel for me. I mean, I know personally I was actually pretty close to attending Full Sail, and that's, as far as technology is concerned, it's a pretty well-known institution locally. It's in Orlando. I don't know if they have any other offices, but stuff like that continues to bring the interest into the school system. Unfortunately, I don't know whether that is spread across the county schools as well. We're in a unique situation. We have the benefit of our charter school system here having that. But you know, that's a discussion that I wish, I guess we were supposed to have some members of the school board here where they could have further elaborated on whether that's something that's available or not. But I just wanted to make that clarification on my end. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussions on this topic?
Ready to move on? Thank you, Superintendent Collins. Appreciate it. I'll now turn the questioning over to Member Zadowich.
Thank you. My first question regarding youth needs would be, how does the city government connect with the youth currently?
Yeah, I think you're living it in real time today. The conversation's been incredible to this point. And I think your ability to give voice to us, and we get to hear from you as leaders, is really important. Staff gets to hear from you, what you're thinking, your openness. Today has been incredible, and that was the whole point of this, was to have this type of conversation.
Councilmember Shepherd?
Yeah, with your term of being on this council, what we really want to learn from you is you have a different set of eyes. I'll give you an example. I said earlier, I have 6 children. My youngest child is 8 years old, and she tells Dad how to do stuff on the iPad. So she has knowledge and education and foresight in certain things that I don't have because it wasn't part of my time. And this is what your group is so important, because you have a different set of eyes and you know what people your age are looking for. You know what's coming up a lot better than we know, because you're living in a different time. So it's real important that, you know, your thoughts and your interests are expressed to us, so that while we're in this position, we can try to implement some of the things that need to be implemented by the knowledge that we get from people in your age group, because you're not here yet. So you have to help us get there, so when you're there, it's that much easier. So just like the example I gave, my 8-year-old daughter, you know, told 59-year-old daddy how to do something. But it's the same thing with every age. You guys have a different set of eyes, you have different knowledge and different foresight. So you need to express it. So that to me, that's the most important part of your group, that you're expressing the needs and wants, and to us, you're educating us, so you're helping all your peers. Thank you.
Councilmember Tate?
Mr. City Manager, I know we have had some discussions with different higher learning technical colleges, universities and stuff. Would it be helpful to engage all these students that want the university to make, you know, like we get letters on city council when there's something that they're concerned about. We get a lot of constituent email. Would it be helpful or a tool to engage all of these students that go to our high schools, not just Oasis, but all over, to say, you know, we want this university and we need higher learning here in Cape Coral? Would it be a tool? If it wouldn't be, then I give the idea up, but.
I think the short answer is yes, it would be helpful.
It might be something you all could take on, you know, each of you in a different school. I know a lot of you go to Oasis, but to your respective schools, and see if, not maybe a petition, but something in a form of communication that we could use for our economic development when we're trying to bring in the universities, that give us one more reason to say, hey, look, we have, you know, 5,000 kids in our school and they want this university. So it's just an idea. What you do with it is up to y'all.
I'd like to say one more thing. Something else came to mind. For instance, when I brought up my idea for the YMCA, one of your responses was, you don't know if brick and mortar is the answer. Well, see, we're from a brick and mortar time. A lot of your answers are done with this device, with communication, with research. You guys do a lot more with this tool than our generation. So keep that in mind as you're trying to be creative with coming up with answers for things, because you know, we were trained in a different way, and we think brick and mortar is the answer. So your group can come up with answers for different problems that could be done in a different way by using technology, creating apps, creating sites, creating, you know, things like that, because you have more, you use that more than our generation uses it. So you might have some interesting ideas that can help our community.
So before Member Zadowich asks her second question, I'll probably ask the police chief to be ready, prepared to answer this one. It's all yours.
Okay.
Who had it? You had it?
I have a quick follow-up question.
Yeah.
Okay, wait, come back to me.
Okay.
If I might just comment on what we had just spoken about, well, our chair, finalizes her question. I think that something that would be very useful is, I know that we as a youth council have developed means of trying to get the word out to students about our meetings, what we're doing. We recently had like an environmental cleanup effort, and we advertised that on our social media, and we use the means that you were talking about to try to connect with the students. But the main part of the question was not simply about our role in connecting to the students, but your role as the city council in connecting with the students. And I'm a major advocate within the student advisory committee to the school board about connecting our adult leaders themselves to the students. So is there perhaps an opportunity in which you as a council or individual members could perhaps visit our schools, have an assembly? I remember like being a student in elementary school far before COVID, and rules on entering and exiting schools were something that kind of plagued our lives. But when I remember our mayor in Chicago, when I lived in the suburb of Chicago, visited our school and would talk to us about different things, about how exciting it was to be a part of our community and things that were happening, and explained it to our very little elementary school brains in simple ways. But if there was any possible ability for you as a board to maybe visit our schools and take the time to make the connection with the students, so it isn't just us as students saying, oh, the council cares about you and they want to hear your ideas, but maybe you as a council pleading for that case as well.
I think, real quick on that, I think there's some opportunities for us individually to visit government classes, student council, and I think everyone up here would be up for that. As far as us all coming collectively for an assembly, that would have to be advertised as a public meeting, obviously, but I think anyone would jump at the chance of coming to any class that was interested in government or interested in issues.
I know personally, I serve as my class president within student government, and an amazing opportunity that we have at my schools. We have a class period devoted to student government. And we watch school board meetings, we talk about issues and ways that we can better our school and just community. And we go to state conferences. This past weekend, we actually took some time out of our spring break and we went to our state conference and represented District 4 and Norfolk Myers High School. And we brought resolutions to the state to be passed on to the Florida legislature. It was an amazing opportunity. And I know that if there's any interest in visiting Norfolk Myers High School, or specifically this class, I would love to get in contact with you, and I know our students would love to hear from you as our community representatives. That's an amazing opportunity for us to be able to speak with you. So I'd love to extend kind of this opportunity that I have to, really get to contact you, but also to the students in this class. Norfolk Myers High School.
Was there, did someone else have their hand up? Or
At the very end, I thought.
I did finalize my question, but if you guys want to go first, that's fine. Okay. Yes. Okay. So Ms. Tate had mentioned something about getting a school interested in putting a maybe satellite location here, or kind of showing a secondary education facility that we want them here. And what made me immediately think of is the fact that Oasis has the ACE program, so does North. Baker has dual enrollment in AP, and then Cape has the IB program. These are all very prestigious programs, which obviously many state and local universities want these kids. They know that these kids have what it takes to work hard, and whether or not they're looking at it from a numbers perspective, the kids who go through this rigorous program, any of them, they are all equally challenging and in their own way. I know that many people up here are in these programs, and the kids who come out of these programs truly do learn so much, and not just education-wise, but in life. The teachers that we have in these programs are so amazing and so fundamental for our growth. And I think that it's very common that a lot of kids who do these secondary programs look for something more. They look for UF or FSU or any other state school because it says something about them. And I think that we as a city can utilize that these children are in these programs. They have a want for a prestigious higher education, and we could provide that for them here, which, like I had mentioned before, will raise a number of benefits for the kids here. So I just thought I'd bring it to light that we have more than what comes to the mind of the programs that these kids have the opportunity to do. And even children who aren't naturally apt to being in these higher level classes, I know that many times they're placed in an AP period because that's the only thing open, and then they end up taking more AP classes the next year because they end up liking it. And it's a very accessible program, and I think that by utilizing that we have these, we can show the want for a higher education here. Thank you.
All right, is that it? Can we get to our second? I think I'm making the police chief nervous because he's probably wondering what you're going to ask. So. Oh, okay.
We got more here.
No, go if
They're on a roll.
So following up with what Councilmember Shepherd actually said, when he pointed out the phone, I think the biggest disconnect between the youth and the government right now is just that gap in technology where not many people I know read the newspaper, not many people I know like participate in things that are just paper, things that are just rarely, they don't check the city websites, or like the newspapers or any other website that you guys typically go through. And I think what we should, another option that we could do is develop something that caters directly to the kids, maybe through an app or through utilizing another secondary app such as like Baby Band, where we can take polls from students and we can let students voice their opinions directly to people in a platform separate that caters directly to something they're familiar with and want to engage with.
Thank you. Okay. Question 2.
Alrighty, so my second question regarding youth needs would be, what is being done to help prevent teens from doing drugs in the city of Cape Coral?
Me.
You're up.
Well, thank you. Before I start, I don't read the newspaper either, but that's for different reasons.
Thanks.
Now, thank you for the opportunity to be here to speak with you. And along the same theme of all the other questions, I think it's about relationship building and providing mentorship opportunities, and specifically for mental health intervention and substance abuse, and a lot of it ties together. So we have a lot of formal programs and a lot of informal programs, but at the end of the day, it all comes down to get as many positive interactions as you can get with young people every single day. And that's one of the goals, both formally and informally, for our department. So I'll go over some of the formal programs that we have and then see how they dovetail into the informal ones. And I think you'll see what I mean about relationship building. But one of the greatest opportunities that we had was born from tragedy, where after the Stoneman Douglas shooting over on the east coast of Florida, where we rapidly had to re-enter the school resource officer program, what's not known is that my predecessor, Chief Dave Newland, had discussions with myself and Deputy Chief Lisa Barnes at the time about getting back into the schools, because we realized that the best way to make connections in a positive way with the youth of our community is to be where they are for a great majority of the time, which is school. So we were doing a slow roll-in to be able to get back into the schools when that tragic event happened. With the signing of that bill by then Governor Rick Scott, that rollout had to take place overnight. So what became a very difficult staffing challenge for us ended up being one of the greatest opportunities we had to really get back into the lives and interaction with the youth of our city in a positive way. Naturally there's going to be a percentage of adults and young people that have negative encounters with law enforcement, but that's not where you're going to make the breakthroughs. The breakthroughs that you're going to make when you're talking specifically about substance abuse or intervention on mental health issues and the consequences that come from both of those is by having positive interaction. So because we're in the schools every single day, every school in the city of Cape Coral, we're able to utilize programs such as GATE, which is, it has gang in it, but there's a much greater focus and substance abuse component with it. It's gang awareness training education. And the main takeaway from that is it's a national standardized program where school resource officers are taught key behavioral indicators to show drug use or drug abuse by the student. Maybe they're affected by drug abuse of someone in the home, and the avenues to be able to intervene. You've heard the term continuum of care, and we use that term quite a bit as well. And when it comes to both mental health and substance abuse, we use the hub and spoke method that the doctor spoke of in that continuum of care. And we are one of the spokes. No one entity or individual is the answer, but we all work together to be able to know where to go. If I am a school resource officer at Ida Baker High School and I'm trained to see the signs of someone in crisis or struggling or reaching out for help, by being there every single day and having overwhelmingly, almost if not all, positive interaction with the students, there's a relationship that's developed where I may be that individual that the student can go to, or I may have the relationship already established that I can reach out to them and then deliver them to that hub for the continuum of care, because I'm taught to recognize it, but I am certainly not at the level that the doctor is at, but I know how to get that student in need to the doctor. And that's one of the main formalized ways that we do it, where you utilize an informal relationship building. So not only do we have GATE, we have Red Ribbon Week, which is a formalized national program that's at the middle school level, which again teaches school personnel, law enforcement, counseling personnel that, because of the Stoneman-Douglas Act, all have to work together. We look for those warning signs and utilize the already established positive relationship to be able to intervene and get them into that continuum of care, notify the parents of some of the findings. They may be already in counseling. It may be something that's not being exhibited at home, or be able to be reported to their counselor, their private counselor. Drug House Odyssey is another formalized program that is very popular, where we partner with Lee Health, Coalition for Drug-Free Southwest Florida, and we do an off-site, this is before COVID, but I believe we're going to rev this back up, where it's a very interactive and informative, kind of a shocking program, where it is a start-to-finish play, interactive play, role-playing exercise, where you're at a party where there's drugs and alcohol, to a vehicle being involved, to a crash, to severe injuries, to the court system, to the victim impact portion of it, to what you do with the rest of your life and see the consequences of that. Because those students are in high school, they're at the driving age, and they're a little bit more emotionally able to handle the adult consequences of those types of actions. And of course, we have our Police Athletic League, the Bill Austin Youth Center. If you don't know, Bill Austin was a Cape Coral police officer, and it's named after him. He was one of our first PAL instructors, was a boxing coach, youth boxing coach. That started one of our main positive relationship interaction programs, whereby if you go to a service academy such as West Point or Annapolis, you still have to perform, or you still have to box, believe it or not, like actual boxing. And a lot of your prime candidates that go to the service academies have made a life of avoiding that type of conflict. And then they realize that they need to learn that before they go to the service academy. So we also have that boxing program, this is going back to the late 80s, for youth that were in need of help. And there was nothing better than to have that mix of real overachievers that are going to West Point and Annapolis interact with children who have made a misstep that are trying to get their lives better. And that's a positive interaction to be able to show them the right way to go. And since the late 80s, and into the 90s when Chief Arnold Gibbs was pivotal in the construction of the Bill Austin Youth Center. We've had a really strong formalized police athletic league, which is nothing but positive interaction with police officers and the youth, all towards, there's no real program, if I can give you the answer, when you say what's being done to prevent kids from doing drugs, there's no one magic bullet for that. And there's no one particular program that's going to work. Really what's going to work is old-fashioned positive interaction, relationship building, and I found over the last nearly 30 years that the more positive interactions you have in a day with a child, the better chances some of it's going to stick. And by having those positive mentors, be it a pastor, a family member, your manager at your first job, your coach, your school counselor, maybe a police officer, whoever that may be, somebody's going to make that breakthrough and show that individual that there is a better way. Obviously, we have all the other traditional means of tackling drug abuse and narcotics. There's the enforcement angle, but just like any other type of societal issue, there is no arresting your way out of that problem, and there is no moving away from that problem. Those problems travel. So it's best to get to the root of it, and the earlier you can intervene with the youth, the better chances that they have to be successful adolescents and better young adults as they progress through their life. So I hope it wasn't too rambling of an answer, but it's really a very complicated issue, and we use many different tools in the toolbox to construct that project.
Thanks, Chief. Those are really important, impactful words, not the newspaper part, but
No offense, Tom.
but everything else. I've learned my lesson. Any follow-up from Youth Council on this? No? Okay.
Okay. We'll move on to item 2. The next topic of discussion is environmental discussions, environmental conservation and pollution. And I'll turn that over to Councilmember Hayden.
Thanks, Mayor. City Manager, if you would have staff available for at least the first 2 questions. And I'll ask Member Lynn, I know you were delayed in arriving. Are you prepared to ask the questions?
Yeah.
Okay, and you can start with your first one.
Okay. So my first question is, what does the future of our city efforts for water conservation look like in 5 to 10 years?
Good question, and I'm going to have the city's Utilities Department Director, Mr. Jeff Pearson, who is extremely passionate about this issue, give you the response to that. Mr. Pearson.
Thank you. That's a great question. Just to give you an idea, here's some urban arithmetic for the worldwide, just to give you an idea of what we're facing. Every week up until 2050, the estimates are we're going to have 850,000 more people on the planet. That's 10 times the city of Fort Myers population every week, increasing. That's greater than 2 times the state of Florida being created every year. By 2050, another China will be created. One thing that we are focused on currently is outdoor water use. According to the EPA, nationwide landscape irrigation accounts for 1/3 of all residential water use. It totals approximately 9 billion gallons of water per day. As much as 50% of that water used for irrigation is wasted. That water is wasted due to evaporation, wind, runoff caused by inefficient irrigation methods, and inefficient irrigation systems. In order to achieve a good water conservation program, you have to include policies, strategies, and activities that are designed to manage fresh water as a sustainable resource, protect the environment, and meet current and future needs and demands. Population, household size, growth, and affluence all affect how much water we use. The goals of water conservation include, but are not limited to, ensuring sustainability for future generations, energy conservation for pumping water, water distribution, and wastewater collection. Treatment facilities consume a significant amount of energy. In some regions of the world, over 15% of the total electric consumption is devoted to water management. Here in Cape Coral, if you didn't know, the city utilities, is the largest customer of LCEC. We're very flat here, so we have to pump the water. We don't have that natural slope or grade like for our wastewater system. So we have to pump that water to get everything back to the wastewater plant so we can treat that water and send it back out as reclaimed water. Basically, water conservation programs are typically initiated at the local level by either municipal water utilities, local government, or regional governments. And some of the common strategies that they include are public education and outreach, tiered water rates, which is basically charging progressively higher water rates the more water that you use. Cities that experience seasonal dry climates, such as Southwest Florida, often encourage Florida-friendly landscaping that reduce outdoor water usage. Some of the things that the city is already doing, I can tell you, is that we have tiered conservation water utility rates. We have a world-class irrigation water system that conserves billions of gallons of water every year. Cape Coral is considered a 100% reclaimed water utility. We actually exceed the definition of being 100% reclaimed water, according to the state of Florida. We have reclaimed water hydrants at each of our wastewater lift stations. We use that reclaimed water to wash down the lift stations to keep them clean. Over 60,000 potable water meters are installed at every potable water connection. Water meters are probably the number one piece of equipment that a utility uses to encourage conservation, because you have to pay for what you use. You're accountable for what you use. The city's 2 RO plants, we actually blend back 20% of our raw brackish water. The city uses basically brackish groundwater that you couldn't drink or even give to your pets. It's too salty, and we turn that into drinking water through reverse osmosis technology. So the city essentially is 100% alternative water supply. We take water that otherwise cannot be used, we recycle it, and we turn it into viable use for either outdoor irrigation or for drinking and domestic uses. We've instituted 2-day, 4-hour-a-week outdoor watering restrictions on irrigation water use. We've installed low-flow water fixtures at all of our utility department facilities and a lot of city facilities. Reuse water is used for wash water also at our wastewater plants to clean out the process equipment, such as the clarifiers and other basins that we use to clean the wastewater. We utilize variable frequency drives. We call them VFDs with our heavy duty pumps. Those basically how they work is they don't start at high speed and stop at high speed. They slowly ramp up to a higher speed and slowly ramp down. It actually saves energy. We've installed solar power supplies at our remote canal water monitoring equipment. That way we don't have to connect it to the electric grid. We use renewable, sustainable energy from the sun. We coordinate with LCEC on peak power shaving at our water and wastewater plants by running our generators. That actually helps us to exercise them because we actually have to run them about once a week to make sure they're always operational in case of an emergency or a natural disaster where we lose power. So that actually saves us money because they call it peak shaving. So when everyone is using that power, we actually reduce the demand on the power grid, and we get a benefit from that on our power bill for the city. We've installed a water fountain in public works and utilities for filling water bottles. We've saved tens of thousands of water bottles, which are a source of pollution. Our city offices use recycling bins and recyclable refuse. We pick that up weekly by the special pops and volunteers. The city's 2 wastewater plants in Southwest RO use reclaimed water for our landscape irrigation. A number of our city parks use reclaimed water to irrigate the athletic fields. And several Lee County schools also use our reclaimed water for athletic fields for landscape irrigation. So basically, we are also looking at tightening up, as I said earlier, about the, and your question was, what is it going to look like in 5 to 10 years? My vision and hope for the future for, conservation is that we continue to try to reduce our outdoor watering consumption. Absolutely everyone wants a green yard, it looks great. But is that really sustainable for everyone? I don't think so. In many places in the United States, your grass gets brown. It doesn't die. It gets a little crunchy. For a period of time, especially, in our area, Southwest Florida is subject to extended droughts, and we're seeing more of those, more frequent. I can remember back in 2007, 6, when I first got here to Florida. That was the first drought that I remember. And since I've been here, I've seen it slowly become more and more, happen more often. I'm not sure if, what's causing that. There's a lot of theories about that, what's causing that, but I don't embrace, any particular theory, but other than something's happening, something's changing, we're going to need to adapt and use less water, not waste it. So we are working on tightening up our ordinances on moving forward with those irrigation systems. I think that's a great source of new water supply. The cheapest form of new water supply can be found through conservation. And so by doing so, that's going to help everyone. It's going to keep our rates down, keep them more, affordable. And because that delays having to build more and more infrastructure and use more and more of a very limited resource. We are very limited in what we have. We're on a peninsula. We don't have large reservoirs. We don't have large lakes, because the key to reliability is storage for any water system. There are ways, we are looking at right now storing water in underground aquifers through aquifer storage and recovery. That's something in the future over the next 5 to 10 years that I see becoming more and more possible. But on the flip side of that, you have to be careful and not damage your drinking water supply. So we are proceeding very cautiously and making sure by doing a hydrogeologic model and analysis. We want to make sure that we don't cause any problems by doing that. But the problem with that technology right now is the water that you put down into the aquifer to store it, you only get about 30% back, and it's very expensive. It costs about $3 or $4 million to build one of these wells and to do all the testing that you have to do that's required by the regulatory agencies. So, but one of the things that we've done recently in this council and staff is to partner with our local utilities, ones that don't have the system that we have. We are very blessed here. We have basically a gigantic wastewater disposal system, but it's not really wastewater, it's reclaimed water, because we can send it back out. A lot of utilities don't have that system. We basically have 2 water pipes. Most just have one, and they use the drinking water for both outdoor irrigation and for domestic use. So we're very blessed in that regard, and then we have a lot of possibilities. Some countries now that are investing more and more in reclaimed water, they don't call it reclaimed water, they call it new water, which I thought was very interesting. So basically that's what I see. I see us, that's a great opportunity is on our outdoor watering side. We are already on our potable drinking water side. We have a very low per capita use. We're about 72 to 77 gallons per person per day, which is extremely low. The national average is probably around over 100 or higher, 100 gallons per day per capita, per person, if you will. So we're doing great in that area. Where we need to tighten up is on that irrigation side. We use about 3 to 4 times more irrigation water than we actually use for drinking, washing our clothes, and domestic use. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you guys.
So, Mr. Pearson was so comprehensive in that answer that he probably answered all 3 questions. So, remember, Lynn, as you asked your second question, if the answer could get maybe specific to just a couple projects, that would be great. Thanks.
Okay. So my second question is the city currently doing anything to help prevent pollutions of our environment?
Mike Gilchizen, our Director of Public Works, who helps oversee the Environmental Resource Division, will take a stab at your answer.
This one. Good afternoon. Thanks for the opportunity to answer that question. First, if I may, I'd like to go back to the previous set of questions where there was a question on how government interacts with youth. And I would just like to kind of let you know what Public Works does, because we look for those type of partnerships where we can. We have several internship opportunities that we've set up with engineering students, both at a high school level and FGCU. So we take on engineering interns. We have an Adopt the Road program where students with their schools can provide litter pickup and around the immediate vicinity of their schools. We host a Public Works Week, which is a national event, and during that we bring in elementary and middle school students to show them basically what Public Works does. We have loaders, we have vibratory compactors, air lifts, bucket lifts, just to kind of get them engaged with what Public Works does. And then we always have volunteer opportunities for like water quality monitoring and just routine cleanup. And so that kind of bridges over into the pollution prevention. Essentially for us, where this comes into play is back in 1972, there was the Clean Water Act that was enacted by Congress. And as a result of that, the following year, there was a system put in place which is called the National Pollution Discharge Elimination System. And so any entity that has known pollutants, point source discharges, is required to put those on record with the government And in response to obtaining that permit to have a pollutant discharge system, we have to do several things to reduce those pollutants. So within the city of Cape Coral, we have what's called an MS4 permit, a municipal separate storm sewer system. And that is basically when it rains or somebody leaves a hose running and the stormwater goes into the swale, it'll eventually make itself into the curb and gutter or to a catch basin, which then goes out a pipe into the canal system. So we have to do a series of things annually, and then routinely we report through Lee County. We have a shared permit. The county basically holds the permit for the entire county, and then all the municipalities report to the county on the activities that we have to do. I'll go through just kind of a rough idea so you have an idea of what's in those reports and what we need to do. We need to let them know where all of our structures are and how we maintain those. We have to let them know where we have litter control, prevention, collection, and removal activities throughout the year, where we have flood control projects or retrofits, any type of pesticide, herbicide, or fertilizer applications that we do, or trainings that we provide to the community that would help reduce over-fertilizing or over-pesticide application. If we are aware of any illicit discharges, such as a toxic waste spill or somebody spills oil on the road, we have to report those and how we remediated those spills. If there is any industrial facilities that have the opportunity to have a point source discharge, so like in our industrial park here, if there's any like paint facilities or anything like that, we're required to inspect them and report and deal with any situations with them directly. And then just routinely, while there is construction occurring throughout the city, you may notice there's like a black fencing that is installed around that property. That is to help keep soil from migrating, because soil also is considered a form of pollution from getting in the canals. So that's what we have to do routinely. It is reported to the county every year. And then every 5 years, we go through a permit renewal with the county as a co-permittee to get a renewal of our pollution discharge elimination system permit. That is kind of a focus on the water quality side. On the, let's say, litter control and pollution, we are working right now currently with Keep Lee County Beautiful on a program to have them basically kind of take over. They administer litter and pollution programs throughout the county, and we are partnering with them soon to basically have them take over or initiate a program within the city of Cape Coral that will be an ongoing annual situation. They will advertise for the events. They will provide for the collection and the removal of any litter. And so we're hopeful to be wrapping up an agreement with them shortly. In addition to that, Vince, I didn't know if you had anything you wanted to discuss on the comp plan, like kind of larger picture issues?
Sure. Vince Cotero, the Development Services Director. On a larger scale, what we do is ensure that when projects are approved, that they apply for the proper permits from different agencies. That's how many of our policies are actually put into practice and how they're implemented. It's through permits through different agencies, and as Mike said, we have to apply for them on city projects as well as developers on private projects, or developers that would be developing city property on city property with a city project. So we hire contractors to do work on city projects as well. These policies range from on a water conservation and pollution control standpoint, they run the gamut. It's water pollution, air pollution, and so forth. One of the things that we take pride in the city, and I don't know if it's a question coming up later. I think it is about well, it's embedded in some of the questions that are coming up later on future growth, is our preservation of endangered species. And the three biggest ones in the city are burrowing owls, which I'm sure you're aware of. You see the burrows and the stakes all over the city, gopher tortoises, and the American eagle, which is federally protected as well, and our regulations are more stringent. So I have copies of all this that I'll give to you in a folder for whoever would take it at the end. I broke it up into three parts. One is the pollution control permit that Mike talked about. It's got that bureaucratic title. It's called National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System. That's a federal permit, and local governments can apply for it if the state makes you eligible, and we are, given the fact that we rely on water conservation so much in our state for economic development purposes and other reasons. And then I also have some policies in our plan regarding environmental resource protection and water pollution and water conservation.
Thanks. Any follow-up from youth council or city council? No? Member Lynn, you want to ask your final question?
The only kind of follow-up I have would be that from a professional and expert point of view, are these plans that you feel are meant to last, or are they something that could change if just one thing goes wrong?
When you mean plans, what, can you just elaborate a little?
So what I'm more referring to is the different preservation of water and renewed water and the RO plants, things like that. Are these something that you feel are built to last for the future generations, or are they something that could be easily changed and modified with infrastructure?
It's a great question. The technology with reverse osmosis is changing. The membranes that filter the water, they basically look like a real tight rolled roll of paper towels. They're spiral wound membranes that filter the salt out. That technology is continuing to get better, where the rejection rate, right now we get 80% recovery of the water that we pull out of the ground. That's with the 20% that we put back after we filter the water. So as that technology, our aquifers, we're actually mining the water underground, and it's going to get more salty over time, more saline. But actually what we do, that technology is going to continue to improve as that water gets more saline. And I see our systems lasting for as long as I can imagine. Actually, worldwide, people are going to be moving more towards the system we have, which is low pressure brackish RO. And the reason why, rather than going to seawater desalinization, because it uses less energy, because you have to send the water, pump the water at a lower pressure to get it through the membranes to get all the salt and minerals out. So, and a lot of the groundwater is being depleted worldwide, and over time, and that water, there's a lot of saltwater aquifers out there that have not even been tapped into, that if they use this technology that we have pioneered here in the Cape Coral area, are going to be able to satisfy their needs for the future. So the outlook is very bright for that technology. It's going to continue to proliferate throughout the world, and we have been the leader in that area. The City of Cape Coral Southwest plant is the oldest continually operated brackish low pressure RO plant in the world. If you Google reverse osmosis, there's a picture of our plant in Wikipedia. So the outlook is very bright. You're welcome. Yes.
So when you talk about pollution, at least from an agricultural standpoint, do you acknowledge the socioeconomic effects? I mean, when you talk about new technology, in the future, environmental concerns are going to only grow more and more in demand and more competitive. And when we deal with inflation now, we're looking at very expensive ways of dealing with pollution. So in the future, do we plan on reducing the economic hardships of it or making pollution and conservation more accessible to maybe areas of our county and district where there isn't as much funding or as much resources?
Wow, who wants to take a stab? Mike, you want to? I have to tell you, that is a very good question and a challenging question.
I will.
Let me just say this before you,
Sure.
you know, so we're a community that's 50% built out, and we don't have a lot of agricultural uses here, right? And so, but we know that in the state of Florida, we're still an agricultural provider. We still grow a lot of crops here. We have a lot of cattle and so forth. And then we have to experience here in our region, when it comes to water quality issues, we are affected by, you know, what happens in the middle of the state in terms of, you know, harvesting sugarcane and things like that. So it is, even though we don't have farms and agricultural uses here within the city limits, it's certainly something that affects us day in and day out. And so from a general standpoint, I wanted to take a stab at that. Now I'm going to turn it over to Mike to really answer your question.
Well, I think we can, I mean, we can speak in generalities, right? So when we are using city resources to fund pollution type measures, we look at the city without any type of socioeconomic. We look at the southeast as the same as the northwest, the same as the southwest and the northeast. So we're having to administer all those programs regardless of the demographics of, you know, which area can afford it more so than others. We also established the funding mechanisms for the Stormwater Fund on a equivalent parcel unit. Basically, regardless of where you are in the city, you basically pay the same amount per equivalent residential unit. When we start to look to utilize funds from outside sources, such as grants, some of those competitive aspects in the grant awards require us to submit socioeconomic elements, and we will partner typically with Vince's staff who can dig into the census tract data on where our lower income is or where our minorities are, and we are able to target projects in those areas based on those elements. But that's because those grants are targeting those type of elements. But generally for pollution in the city, when we're using city resources and assets, it's universal.
Okay, almost afraid that. Member Lynn, we'll try once more. Question 3.
All right. The last question is, does the council plan to set high environmental standards as the city of Cape Coral continues to grow? And if so, what current or future policies does that entail?
Well, the quick answer is yes, and I think staff has touched on some of them, but to kind of wrap up this segment, the council recently passed the Uep Master Plan, which will take, which will put everybody on city utilities hopefully by the year 2045, and that's key because it takes people off of septic systems, which is a key contributor to pollution and is an environmental threat. The reclaimed water pipeline from Fort Myers to here will replenish our canals with water that helps with irrigation, helps with the fire department. You'll see, you know, we're currently working on permits for bubble curtains that will help keep blue-green algae out of 10 key saltwater canals. You look at some of our parks and how they're preserving the environment, preserving the wildlife, whether it's gopher tortoises, burrowing owls, things like that, providing walking trails so people can experience what that life will be like. That's just some of the things we're doing that impacts the future. Mr. Pearson mentioned a proposed irrigation ordinance that's coming forward to council eventually that will educate people to water efficiently their lawns. And that's important because it conserves water. You know, our canals are at a deficit right now because we're in a drought, and our canals are low, and that affects water pressures, affects what our affects a lot of things. So if we can teach people to water better, it keeps stormwater runoff and pollutants, nutrients from getting into our canals, you know, which are key things. So I think those types of things set the city up for your future here and beyond. So thanks.
And if I can, Mr. Mayor, just add on to Councilmember Hayden's comments. And as part of the city's long-term strategic plan that looks at where we're going to be in 2030, the city council has said that environmental sustainability is one of their strategic priorities. And we're currently working with them on wordsmithing a goal statement. And one thing that we're going to be recommending to city council soon, or proposing to city council soon, is some language that goes along the lines like this: preserve Cape Coral's natural resources for current and future generations. So that's going to set the direction for us as an organization and as a community to strive towards over the next 8 years or so.
Okay, we'll move on to item 3 is future growth plans, traffic, Burnt Store Road project, and current and future large projects within the city. Councilmember Hayden.
Again, City Manager, if you'd have the appropriate staff available to answer these questions, and we move on to Member McMillan.
Sure. So we're going to have Mr. Mike Ilchizen take a stab at answering a lot of those questions as they relate to transportation. And Vince will also chime in with regards to planning and things like that.
All right, so my first question is, does the city government do anything to help reduce traffic problems, especially with the snowbirds coming down? Is there going to be any production in new roads, new public transportation, especially for youth who cannot drive, and also for youth that are unfortunately driving in dangerous situations as traffic increases?
So let me take a quick stab at what we do in general to help mitigate the impacts that future development has on the local transportation systems. First and foremost, you know, there is a planning process when developers come in to meet to get their permits, when they meet with Public Works, when they meet with Development Services, and they have to meet a certain level of standards and criteria that determines how they go about addressing the impacts that their particular project has on local transportation patterns, right? And this is, I know you mentioned snowbirds particularly, but we look at it in general. We don't separate whether they're snowbirds or, you know, they're people, right? And so if you come in and you say you're going to build this type of development, let's say you're going to build 500 apartments, and there's a formula that we use, and we're able to say that your 500 apartments are going to create these amount of trips on the local roadway network. Then we require the developer to fund some improvements to the city's transportation network to help offset the extra traffic that they're causing. And then in terms of additional projects, we are constantly working with Lee County. We constantly work with the state of Florida's Department of Transportation to advance projects and to obtain funding for projects across the entire city that will help move people. Now, notice that I said it help move people, not necessarily cars, because I think we have to get away from the mindset of moving cars as quickly as possible and recognize that cars are just only one method of getting from point A to point B. And so we have to take into account the old-fashioned way, which is foot power, and people like to walk. That's a very effective mode of transportation. People like to ride bicycles, scooters, and all kinds of transportation devices that are out there. And we need to make sure that as we continue to mature as a city and prepare this city for when you take over our roles, that we need to take into account that there are multiple modes of transportation. So I think we're addressing that. And then I think the last point to your question was, what specifically are we doing in terms of maybe working with Lee County to improve public transit options? I thought I heard that. You know, that's more of a challenge for us here in Lee County because we are so spread out. We're over 130 square miles and we are not dense, and so it becomes very problematic to provide at least traditional transit services when you don't have the density and you're spread out. It's very inefficient. I know Lee County Transit is going to be piloting, they have a pilot program right now, I think, in Bonita, and they're looking at expanding it here in Cape Coral sometime soon, which is basically like a transit on demand program. Very similar to rideshare like Uber and Lyft, where you use an app and you call for an Uber or Lyft. Well, you're going to be able to do the same thing with Lee County Transit Services. And rather than them sending a big 40-foot bus to your home, it'll be a smaller van. And they're able to pool multiple trips in a particular region. They'll go to your house, they'll pick you up, and then take you to your destination. So that's something that is in the works, and hopefully you'll see being rolled out within the next 2 years or so here in Cape Coral. Now I'm going to ask my colleagues here to my left, both Vince and Mike, to also provide any comments that they may have.
Sure, thanks, Rob. That was a good introduction on how we reduce traffic problems. There's routine maintenance items that we perform, such as traffic crash analysis. So our traffic engineering department is tied into a database that the police department crash reports get sent to. All of the little boxes on the accident reports, you know, the direction of travel, the condition of the road, the time of day, all those aspects, rear end, T-bone, go into a database, and we have access to that database. And what we do is we monitor those crashes throughout the city. So we identify the top 10 intersections in the city that have crashes. We identify the highest number of T-bones, highest numbers of rear ends, pedestrian to vehicular, bicycle to vehicular. And as a result of those, then our traffic engineers and traffic operations staff then will start to look at, okay, which of these are correctable. So if it went from a two-way stop to an all-way stop, if we went from an all-way stop to a controlled intersection, if we have a controlled intersection with lights but it's all permissive, no protected, such as a left turn or right turn arrow, maybe we can add some protected movements, and then all those things start to reduce the conflicts, or at least manage the conflicts on the roadway. And we do that routinely. So in fact, right now we have several intersections in the city that are under analysis for a signal warrant, what we call a signal warrant analysis. Sometimes it's just as simple as adding a designated turn lane to an intersection so that movement is out of the throughway, and then it decreases rear end crashes. So we're always looking for opportunities to reduce traffic, but also increase safety as well, because sometimes traffic is unavoidable if you just have so many people trying to get to one area. In that case, we look then to improve on the safety. But if there are traffic situations, we have several projects. So I'll just kind of go through a little bullet point list of the things that we have under construction right now. So we have Nicholas Parkway, basically from Pine Island Road all the way here to Country Club. That's involving curbing. As you maneuvered through the S-turns, we have a lot of cars that were sliding through and they were taking out landscaping. So we're adding what is called super elevation to those roads. So traditional elevation is just longitudinally as you travel, it goes up and over, let's say like a river, but super elevation is not only vertical but also angular. So as you if you think of like a racetrack going around a turn, so as we go through those S-turns now, we're going to have some super elevation, and that helps keep the cars from sliding and knocking down our landscaping. We're looking at, as I said, signal warrant analysis along. We have signals going in on Del Prado and De Navarra and Del Prado and Averill. So those are signals that have actually met warrants and will be going in. We have several that are going into just analyzing whether or not they're ready for a signal. In keeping with the safety of non-vehicular traffic, we have the Sun Trail project along Kismet, and then down Van Buren. That is unmotorized vehicle. It's like a 12-foot multi-use path that will allow people on bicycles and people to walk, off the road. We have the Burnt Store widening, which is adding sidewalks, paths underneath the bridges. If you notice, there's some elevated bridges. We're providing an opportunity for people on the east side of Burnt Store and west side to go underneath those bridges, so they're disjointed from the actual traffic. They don't have to. We can eliminate that potential for a pedestrian vehicle strike. We're improving alleys along Del Prado Boulevard, so that will move some traffic that are going to serve businesses off of Del Prado. That eliminates turns, and so that will decrease traffic there. And then we're looking at a bridge master plan right now that's analyzing all the bridges in the city to see which ones are good candidates for changing the alignment, changing how they handle traffic, which ones need to just be repaired. And in some places, there may be bridges that are in the far outreaches of the city that don't really provide any tangible benefit other than you eliminate a trip around a neighborhood. So some of them may be candidates for outright removal. But we're undergoing a bridge master plan. And then as far as projects that we have in the pipeline, things that we've discussed with the City Council and our Metropolitan Planning Organization in the state of Florida, is a visioning plan for State Road 78, Pine Island Road. Right now, we've got a corridor access management plan for that, which is outdated. And really the way that road has developed has not really kept in focus with what the vision was for it back in the 80s and 90s. So we're looking at revising that, which would help us speed up 6-laning State Road 78. We're looking at the bridge replacements on the Cape Coral Bridge. On the far east end of the city, on Northeast 24th, heading towards the VA hospital and the Army Reserve, and basically trying to alleviate traffic on Del Prado. We're trying to provide an easternmost either divided highway or just adding like a triple left in the center on 24th. That'll keep a lot of traffic from having to go to Del Prado. We're looking at a midpoint bridge widening to 6-lane, Burnt Store 4-laning from basically Van Buren all the way to the county line. Veterans in Santa Barbara right now is an intersection that functions like Veterans in Del Prado. And we're looking at, there was at one point a possibility of basically putting an overpass so we can head east a lot faster than we do. So that is being explored. A flyover at Colonial and Summerlin, which basically would just allow us to continue elevated, basically to get out to 75 quicker than we are today. Chiquita widening, so that was on the plan several years ago, but we're looking at bringing that back. And as well as in the North Cape, functions a little bit different than the South Cape. So in the South Cape, a lot of our divided roadways are carrying traffic from the south to the north to get the veterans. In the north, unlike the south where it's mostly a north-south movement, in the north we have basically Kismet and Diplomat and Tropicana. Most of the traffic is trying to get east and west. So we have an east-west corridor planned for Diplomat Parkway, which would be the first 6-lane widened road in the north to get traffic from 41 all the way over to Burnt Store. And with those 6-laning projects, we will include a complete streets type design, which will include bike paths and pedestrian walkways such as sidewalks.
Follow up?
Councilmember Welsh.
Yeah, I just wanted to also let you guys know about the Lee-Tran on-demand service. We were at a Metropolitan Planning Organization meeting, I think last week or the week before, and the director there of Lee-Tran said that they've had very, very good things on their trial run in Bonita or Estero, where it's at now. It's almost too popular, that they're not able to handle what they what their expectations were. So I know they're looking to complete that and do it. I know their average ride is about $1.50. So instead of having to call an Uber that costs you 10 to 15, you'll be able to get picked up and brought to certain locations for that lower rate, and that's what they're trying to compete with, some of those ride shares. And it also, they will bring you to the transfer centers. So say you wanted to get to the Edison Mall, or you wanted to get out to Coconut Point, that ride share will at least get you to that public transit, which will then get you to the different hubs and move you around. So that is something that when they proposed it to us and gave us an update here, hearing that update again at the MPO meeting, that it's going really well. I hope to work with Lee-Tran and hopefully get that pilot program into Cape Coral sooner than later. So that is one thing that I think is important. Thank you.
Any other follow-up? Question? Whoops. Okay.
My follow-up question is, is Bonita Springs that's utilizing it so far? Is that what you've said? The ride share? Okay, so is the city of Bonita Springs utilizing that competitive price to lure more people in? Because I know that it may seem very popular right now, but I have a feeling that people, especially in Cape Coral, which is much larger, it may cause an issue of worry where people may trust a brand like Uber or, I don't take those, so I don't know the other names, but Lyft, yes, something like Uber or Lyft, which is more mainstream and name brand per se. Is this going to cause an issue? What I'm really asking is, how is that competitive price being advertised to the citizens of Bonita Springs?
So actually, I believe they utilize those apps, Uber and Lyft. I think potentially
Right.
Uber is what it'll just show up as you can do Uber XL, or there's going to be a local transit option which has the ride share. So they're actually integrating with software that's already been developed, so they're not trying to recreate the wheel. And like I said, it seems to be working there. So anyone who's currently using Uber or has an account will be able to see. And I think they're planning on Cape Coral just to launch in a certain region, not the whole 50 square miles that the city is. They're going to start reaching out to certain areas and offer certain rides, and then expand as the program gets larger.
All right. Question 2.
Would it be beneficial if we limited the number of questions in this section, or should we just move forward with all
Well, I was thinking about that. I think we can probably run through some of these fairly quickly, especially your next question.
Okay.
So,
Well, the next question is very simple. Is there an estimated finish date for the Bird Store construction?
well, I think that's what I want you to clarify. You talking about Burnt Store Road? Because it'll be a
That was-
much longer answer if you talk about Burnt Store.
That was not a question that I had provided, so I'm not sure if anyone in this room.
Yeah, let's keep that one at Burnt Store Road.
Yeah, so for the section that's under construction right now, it's October of this year.
Awesome.
Okay.
So my next question, I personally am very impressed with the amount of parks and recreation that we are instating in the state. I've looked at all of the maps and all of the blueprints. But one thing that I was wondering, do you have any ideas for projects to target towards the teenage population? For example, something like a botanical garden, a drive-in movie theater, or a recreational center, especially if, say, the golf course is up for grabs. Any beautiful large properties that I know that since I was a kid I've had my own mental blueprints of. I was wondering if that's something that was on your guys' radar.
Well, I think as Councilmember Tate did earlier, I think let's hear your ideas first. Would you guys really go to a drive-in movie theater?
Yes.
You would?
I think just an example, something like the golf course that already has natural vegetation after being left there on its own for some time, we can see that it has its own natural vegetation starting. I think I really like botanical gardens, so something along those lines. Or again, everyone loves a drive-in movie theater. I know that might be hard to believe, but that's something. And also, if things like that, and also a recreational center with, just like pool tables and arcade games and things that kids could enjoy while also, because you know, there's some large properties that could be invested in that could hold multiple things like the drive-in at night, but also the recreational center during the day and a botanical garden during the day. Things like that, like affordable dining options, because a lot of teenagers like to go out to eat, but maybe they don't have the money to go out and eat all the time. So just things that I was thinking about.
Councilmember Shepherd?
Just to let you know, the Botanical Gardens has been a passion of mine for years, and with me being on council, that's one of my goals, is to make that happen. So any ideas or help from you or anyone else that's a citizen in Cape Coral, that's a goal of mine. I see that as a great asset if we can have that, the Botanical Gardens in our city. So it was nice to hear it from someone in your age group that you guys would be interested in that. I really enjoyed hearing that. Thank you.
Councilmember Long?
Thank you. Yeah, just following up, I personally love the idea of the indoor recreational center. I've actually brought it up with a couple different members of staff periodically. I think we're one of the only municipalities regionally that doesn't have one. There's a couple in Fort Myers I know, and even if they don't, there's something supplemental, like we discussed earlier, the YMCA, for example. So that's maybe something to consider as we move forward, because that's a tough nut to crack with regards to the expenditures on the front end from a city project, although I would love to support that. But maybe something collaborative or even just working with the YMCA. I know Councilmember Shepherd had said something about the brick and mortar and maybe shying away from that. But I think with regards to, I don't think he was encouraging it, but just brought the idea up. But I would be in support of something like that. I think it's something that we need here locally, and I don't think the indoor recreation is ever going to go anywhere. So I don't think it's a generational thing. I think it's something that the youth will continue to support.
Yes, ma'am.
I would really like to see a space where like people in Cape Coral could grow into. When we talk about like an indoor recreation center or a botanical garden, I think it would be a great idea to find space in a way to combine the two and make it a space that little kids can enjoy, that older people can enjoy, that teenagers can enjoy, and develop a space that is interested in both parties but caters to the needs of everyone in the city.
I would actually kind of like to almost counter that idea and say that I think that we have a lot of spaces that are utilized by little kids and a lot of spaces utilized by adults. And I think by creating a space that teenagers feel is their own, obviously monitored so that nothing illegal would occur, but a space that they can feel like they can use themselves without feeling like it's being overcrowded by the families moving in, the tourists here, something that feels more like a recreational center for their age and something that they feel is right for their age group.
So, Councilmember Tate, that should be near and dear to your heart, because at one point here there was a teen center. And so to hear that coming from you, that you'd be interested in something a little more modern than maybe what was out in the 60s or 70s, but the old golf course obviously has been a discussion point for many, many years, and it could become available for the city to purchase at some point. A lot has to happen, and there's a lot of opportunities there with over 170 acres and what could go there, so there's possibilities out there.
Councilmember Tate?
I was just going to tell you that, yes, I was an original teen in the teen center, and I was a council member that created the new youth center, the Bill Austin Youth Center. So I'm happy to hear that you talk about the youth center, that it obviously needs some work, needs some program updates, maybe some apps that can bring you all back to the facility, because that's exactly what it intended to be when we fundraised for it under Chief Gibbs. So thank you for that. And as for the golf course, we're going to put Walsing Waters in there, along with Dan's Botanical Gardens, and you guys could put a drive-in in the middle, and we'll have a great time.
I think that's a perfect idea, personally.
Our city manager's going, no.
I'm on board with it.
Yep, see, she's on board.
All right, anything else, or you want to move on to the next question?
Yeah, so just in general, I know that the COVID 47th is kind of an example of this, but what are the council's plans on incentivizing more so recreational business developments geared toward juvenile entertainment? Getting other businesses to come in, support juvenile entertainment.
Well, I mean, I think we're always looking at ways to bring in developers. You know, we're passing new economic incentive packages and how that might fit into those particular needs. I think we're always looking at ways to incentivize whatever it might be, specifically to your needs and how that fits within our city. Anything else? I guess we move on to Chair Young. I think your questions are next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. My first question is going to be, how are you planning for a growing population while accounting for youth wants and needs?
I think we've probably covered that through this discussion tonight, so unless you had something specifically you all were looking at on that one?
Personally, I don't know who wrote the question, so I don't know what their aim was with it.
Okay.
So if it's okay, I guess we'll just move on.
Yep.
If that's okay with everyone? All right. How do you plan to prepare for all the large projects coming? COVID 47th, Crystal Lake, Yacht Club when it comes to traffic, amenities, parking, etc.
Mr. City Manager, you want to?
Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Vince for 1 second. But again, typically when these development projects come in, we look at it on a project-specific basis, but then we also look at it citywide. How does it impact the whole city? How does it benefit the whole city? And then we have long-term planning principles that the city council adopts that we have to live to make sure that all of our priorities are addressed. So we want development, but it has to be the right type of development to happen here. And we want to make sure that we don't jeopardize the fabric of what makes Cape Coral Cape Coral. So Vince, you want to help me out on that?
Sure. To supplement what Mr. Hernandez just said, we have two basic tools that we use when a project comes in, and we look at them on an individual basis to get their approval, and there's a whole different number of processes, and I won't go into that because it's just a bunch of bureaucratic jargon. You probably don't want to hear it, but we do have to take other issues into account. So, for example, one of the tools is our master plan. We call it a comprehensive plan. It's mandated by the state of Florida since, well, technically 1975, so that's 47 years ago, but it became mandatory 10 years later in 1985. Every city and county has one in Florida. You have to. Then we have a set of regulations that implement that. A variety of regulations, zoning codes, and so forth. So those items that you mentioned are essentially the same as we have on our checklist. So let's talk about a few of them. Traffic, as you heard a few minutes ago, it's not just automobiles. We look at alternative ways people might, or developers might implement it in their program, different practices in order to assure that people can traverse the roadways and get to the project. It doesn't necessarily have to be through vehicles. As a matter of fact, we're trying to provide incentives for people to have less cars and more opportunities for people to use other means. And like you were talking about earlier, other ways of getting to a site via a vehicle like Uber and Lyft and those kinds of things, which is a very important issue for us. Parking. Two of the developments we're dealing with right now, one you have mentioned, COVID 47th, and one on Bimini Basin, just a mile or so away, if that. On the south side of Cape Coral Parkway at Palm Tree, there's development that is proposed there, which will include apartments or condos like the Cove 47, both of those developments have parking garages. Now, that's a big deal for us because it's not only going to serve the residents there, but we'll have a certain amount of spaces that will be available for people that are using the businesses down there. So that'll be another alternative. But what we try to do is work with people who change the business. For example, most of downtown is built out, but there's people that change businesses all the time. We don't go through another analysis on parking there because we believe it can be absorbed. And we have documented this, and it's in our codes. The parking can be absorbed by the city-owned parking lots down there, you know where Big John's is and all that. The city owns those lots, several of them. Between the lots that are available at the businesses and the city-owned lots, and then with the creation of parking garages, and then Club Square, the city owns that as well, we hope that that is really enough so that we can really start a new model and get people to walk more. And that's one of the reasons why the city spent $15 million or so on 47 Terrace and put the pavers in to create more of, create a business scheme, if you will, that will allow people to walk more on the streets and get more cars off the road. So time will tell how successful that is. So that's how we look at it now. That's just in one area of the city. If you take a development, a brand new development that went in the Northwest, if a shopping center goes in the Northwest, whenever, it could be next week or 5 years from now. And I met just yesterday with a developer that's looking at some sites for a new power center, they call it, like Publix, Target, and all that. Well, that requires a lot of parking, and we have regulations for that. So that's how that would be handled. But you can see the difference between the two. You've got raw land, vacant land up in the Northwest and other parts of the city. But some of the larger parcels are up in the Northwest, off Burnstore Road. And then downtown, a lot more compact, more challenges in that area. So that's what we look at. In terms of amenities, our amenities are usually coupled with our recreation plan. You talked about that, what we're doing for youth, how that blends in with the, did you talk about the Go Bond? Okay, well, maybe we'll get into that, I don't know, but we have a master plan for enhanced parks and recreation and improvements to existing facilities. But the amenities for individual developments are really geared towards recreation on a large scale, and it's really for residential properties. Commercial properties, industrial properties, there isn't an analysis done to determine what amenities may be needed. The reasoning is people are in those businesses either from out of town or in town, but they live somewhere else, and that's where the amenities should be in other parts of the community to serve the residents, not the businesses. That's the theory behind it. So.
Okay. Any follow-up? No? The final question.
Reading this question, I do think we've covered a lot of it. It's about residential development. So if you have anything to add, feel free, but I'll read it anyways. What can citizens expect to see for the future of new residential development in the city?
Well, I think, and I'll let you follow, we just recently went through a projected population growth model and what the city's going to look like at build out around, was it 2080?
2030.
2030?
Well, yeah, we did take it out even much further.
2080, and what it's going to look like, how many more police stations we'll need, fire station, or police officers, fire stations, parks, schools, and things like that. And part of that, how does residential development fit into a community that right now is 92% residential, and how that looks going forward. So,
well, I think as we continue to move forward, I think you're going to see the continuation of a lot of single-family homes, because that's the nature in which the Cape was initially developed. We have a lot of what's called pre-platted lots, and that type of land use lends itself to single-family homes. So you're going to see that. You're going to continue to see that. But what we've been experiencing here in the Cape probably within the last 10 years, and I think that'll continue into the future, is you're going to see a lot more of these larger apartment complexes, right? And I think last time Vince and I talked about it, we probably have like 2,400 rental units going through the pipeline. And so those aren't going to be your duplexes. Those are going to be your large developments like Aspire. That's the one that's going up on Chiquita. So you're going to see more of that. But I think you're also going to see a lot more what Vince was talking about just a few seconds ago, and that's mixed-use developments, where you may have residential on the same site as retail, offices, and other amenities, because that is a smarter and more efficient way of utilizing land, right? Try to put as much as you possibly can into one particular parcel to minimize the amount of space that you need for parking and things of that nature. So we're working with several developers as we speak on these mixed-use projects where somebody will be able to live on one corner of the project, and they will be able to go downstairs, and within a 10-minute walk, they'll be able to go to work, and then for lunch, they'll be able to work another 10 minutes, and they'll still be on the same property. So you're going to see more of that. And you see that in many other urbanized parts of the country. And I think that now as the city continues to grow and land becomes more and more scarce, you're going to see that type of development here in the Cape.
I don't know much about the subject, but I was curious as to, I know that there were speakers previously at the beginning of the meeting that were concerned about zoning issues. Would that have any impact on that, or as far as like making residential areas closer to businesses?
Well, yes. I mean, I think, with the case of the two people that came up to the podium, that's not quite their issue, but I guess in general it could be. And so, again, we look at how property is classified to be used, right, as residential, commercial, industrial, and things of that nature. Because what we try to do is we try to maximize the land uses. I think what you're going to be seeing in the future is more mixed use zoning and less specific purpose zoning, such as residential versus commercial. And we're going to say, well, you have this large area. We're just going to say it's going to be mixed use. We want you to do all of that on this parcel of land, rather than saying, no, you're only going to be able to do a single family home, or you're only going to be able to do this particular purpose.
Okay, anything else? I just want to say one thing. I am really proud of you guys tonight. I have been waiting for months for you to reach the expectations that I had set for you, and you absolutely exceeded them tonight. You guys shined tonight. You were engaged, you were conversational, you asked great questions, the energy was high, staff fed off the energy, we fed off the energy, and as I said, you exceeded my expectations for what I wanted this meeting to be, so thank you.
And Mr. Mayor, I have to agree with Councilmember Hayden. I'm actually looking forward to going back to our regular council meetings. I mean, because I'm sweating over here with the type of questions that they're asking us. I mean, they're very well thought out questions, and I want to thank them for taking the time, and because it made us think as we try to formulate our answers to those questions.
Councilmember Shepherd.
Yeah, on the last topic, you're really teachers for us, and I'll give you an example. When you asked about housing, what are the city plans for housing? Where do you see yourselves? What's your goal? What type of housing are you picturing that you're going to want? Because that's what we need to hear. We might be planning on continuing the way housing is built, but your generation might not be interested in that type of housing. So that's where your group is so important to us, so that we can learn on what things to implement to be prepared for when your generation is interested in housing and purchasing a house. I have two children that have homes, and they decided to do the minimalist, idea. Their dream wasn't to have this huge home. They wanted to have a small home. When I grew up, my peers, we all wanted to have the big home someday, So, we base our decisions on the knowledge that we gathered in our lifetimes, but we really need to hear what people your age are looking for in the future. That helps the city move in the right direction. So it's really cool for us to hear what your dreams are. A lot of these problems that you're throwing at us, people like you are going to come up with the answers. So it's good to hear from you. So I really enjoyed this. I'm glad that you came forward and made the goal to be on this board and set some goals. I'd like to see you guys set some goals and achieve them. Thank you.
Councilmember Tate.
I just wanted to ask you, would they be a part of the ULI? Because I know that we meet during the mornings a lot with ULI and they're in school. But it would be great to have one of their members or attend a session.
Yes, I'm going to check back with staff. I know that when we were planning the ULI visit a year ago, we made it a point to include them, but I know there's been turnover with membership on the youth council, so I've got to see where all of that is. But that was definitely our intent to ensure that, because with the whole ULI study, we're looking at what's the city going to look at 50 years from now, right? Because we had just celebrated our 50th anniversary, and so clearly it's important that we have members of the youth council participating in that process, but I will follow up.
Yeah, I'd also like to say, I think you guys did a great job tonight, and I want to thank you for carving out some time in your busy evening, because I know that you guys are very busy as well. Like the other council members stated, you have a different perspective than we do. And I can sit here and tell you, when I was your age, I definitely didn't have the perspective that you guys, the six of you, have had tonight, and the dialogue and discussion that you had. So you're a step above many of us. So I wish you all the best in your future. I'm glad that you participated in the youth council. Your vision is important to us, like some of the council members said, because you're our future. So it's very important to hear how you see our future, or your future, moving forward. So thank you. It was very interesting tonight, and I got a lot out of the discussion. So I look forward to having more of these meetings in the future. And that's why, the youth council, that's exactly why you're here, is for yours on the future, and also what your peers are looking for. You're bringing that information to us. So any way we can help, if you'd like us to go out to the schools, like Councilmember Hayden stated, I'm sure any of us would take you up on that opportunity. So we're here to help you in any way that we can help you as well. So thank you. And with that, I will turn it back over to Chair Young, who does have an announcement.
Hello, everyone. Here for a positive announcement now that we've had that very engaging conversation. The only thing I'd like to say is that our spring gala is Saturday, April 2nd from 7 to 10 p.m. at the Lake Kennedy Center. We have all been eagerly working on it. I'm very excited, I can say. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be very magical, and I would say that our theme, Intertwined, is pretty much going to come to life. I can tell you guys that we've confirmed a number of student art pieces that are going to be showcased at the event, as well as student-made hors d'oeuvres and music, as well as a guest speaker, which will be Mayor Gunter, which I'm sure you all would love to hear him speak. And what else do I have? Oh, catering. That's very exciting. We're getting 3 meatballs. Adult tickets are $30, and is it 2 meatballs? 2 meatballs. Oh. Meatballs. They are now 3. I've changed it. Yeah, that is what I'm thinking of, I think. Adult tickets are going to be $30. Student tickets are for people aged 20 and under. Those are going to be $5. If your child is under the age of 4, your child is free to get in, as well as they can eat for free. If you guys aren't going to be coming out for the student pieces, please come for the main purpose, which is our mission of donating to Blessings in a Backpack. I'm very passionate about this. Growing up in the Lee County system, I've seen a lot of kids who have been affected by parents who have either been mistreating their children or unable to take care of them in a way that's sufficient, and I can fully say that Blessings in a Backpack is one of the most beneficial organizations in Southwest Florida, and it is a really good cause. We have raised a lot of money so far that I'm so excited to see how much we're able to donate this year, and I hope I'll see you all there. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, time and place of future meetings. We have a regular meeting of the Cape Coral City Council is scheduled for Wednesday, April 6, 2022, beginning at 4:30 p.m. here in council chambers. Do we have a motion for adjournment? Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Meeting adjourned.